On the first morning Ethan Mercer owned an abandoned campground, the office phone woke him at 6:43. He lifted his head from a folded sweatshirt. The green desk phone rang again beneath a veil of cobwebs. Mercer's Landing, he answered, because the words were printed on the receiver. "Oh, good," a woman said. "You are open." Ethan looked through the dirty window at waist-high weeds, a collapsed section of porch, and cabin three's gutter hanging like a broken arm. Not exactly. This is Darlene Avery. We have cabin 6 reserved for September 6th. Roy promised he'd finish the ramp. Ethan sat up. Reserved? There was a calendar beneath an old coffee tin. 40 dates had been marked in blue ink. 40 names, 40 confirmation numbers. His family had given Caroline Grandpa Roy's paid-off house and handed Ethan a campground that had been closed for 3 years. They had called it fair, maybe generous. Nobody had mentioned the guests. "Is Roy there?" Darlene asked. Ethan looked at the cot where he had spent the night because his sister had changed the locks on the house. "No," he said, "Roy's not here." 2 days earlier, the campground had been nothing more than a photograph on Grandpa Roy's dining room table. The picture had been taken in better years. Sunlight lay across the lake. Every site was occupied, and the dock was crowded with aluminum fishing boats. The wooden sign out front still had all its letters. Ruth Mercer set her palm over the photograph, as if she were trying to prevent the place from escaping. "The acreage is the important thing," she said. Ethan's father, Daniel, nodded. He had been nodding for most of the meeting. "Land holds value. Bathhouses don't," Ethan said. Daniel stopped nodding. Caroline sat across from Ethan with a yellow legal pad aligned perfectly with the edge of the table. She had made columns for taxes, insurance, utilities, and repairs. She had also brought sandwiches from the deli, though nobody had touched them. The pickle smell had taken over the room. Grandpa Roy's chair remained empty at the head of the table. Ethan kept glancing at it. The blue cushion still held the shallow dent Roy had made over 30 years of leaning toward the window whenever a truck pulled into the drive. Caroline clicked her pen. "We're not saying the campground is in perfect shape. The roof on the office leaks. The electric pedestals are older than Dad. The well hasn't been tested in 2 years. "Thank you," Daniel said. "You're welcome." "Can we not do this?" Ruth asked. "Not today?" It had been 9 days since the funeral. Apparently that was enough time for grief to become scheduling. Roy's will divided his estate equally between Ethan and Caroline, but did not say who received which property. The house and campground could be sold, with the proceeds divided, or Ethan and Caroline could sign a family settlement assigning one property to each of them. Caroline wanted the house. She had wanted it before the funeral flowers wilted. She and her fiancé, Micah, were renting a narrow townhouse near the highway, and Roy's house had 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, and no mortgage. Caroline described it as a place where she and Micah could build a life. She said the phrase gently, as though Ethan had never built anything and might not understand the concept. The county assessed the campground acreage higher than the house. That number made the division look fair if everyone avoided looking at the campground itself. "You've always loved it out there," Caroline said. "I loved it when it was open. You helped Grandpa with it last summer. I replaced 6 boards on the dock, and the pump at the fish cleaning station." Daniel spread his hands. "That's exactly what we mean. You know how to handle things." Ethan stared at him. "Things, mechanical things." "Right." Caroline's pen made another click. "I can't run a campground, neither can I." "You could learn, so could you." A flush moved up her neck. Caroline had inherited their mother's fair skin and their father's inability to conceal annoyance. "I have a full-time job." There it was. Ethan looked toward the kitchen. Roy's brown coffee mug sat upside down on a towel by the sink, where Ethan had left it the morning the ambulance came. He had washed it automatically while waiting for the hospital to call. "I work," Ethan said. "I didn't say you didn't. You didn't have to." Ruth pressed her fingers to her forehead. "Ethan, nobody is attacking you." He almost laughed. His family preferred attacks that could be reclassified as concern. For the last 11 months of Roy's life, Ethan had slept in the spare room and organized pills in a white plastic tray every Sunday. He had learned how Roy liked his socks folded, how to get him out of the bathtub without making it feel like a rescue, and which television preacher Roy insulted but watched anyway. Ethan had also taken repair jobs at the marina, worked weekends when they needed him, and kept less than $2,000 in checking because steady employment did not make room for a 78-year-old man who sometimes fell. Caroline had handled the paperwork. She called insurance companies, drove Roy to 2 specialist appointments, and stocked the freezer with labeled meals he complained about before eating. She had helped. Ethan knew that. But she went home afterward. "You've been living here without rent," Daniel said carefully. "That was a form of support." Ethan turned back from the kitchen. "I was taking care of him, and we appreciate that." The word appreciate landed badly. Caroline lowered her pen. "I'm not saying you didn't do a lot." "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying Micah and I need the house." Ethan glanced around the dining room, at June's china cabinet, at the wallpaper Roy had threatened to remove for 19 years, at the doorway where pencil lines recorded heights before both grandchildren became adults. Caroline's line stopped at 5'6". Ethan's climbed to 6'1", followed by Roy's handwriting, "Show off." "And I don't?" Ethan asked. Caroline's mouth tightened. "Need is different when you're responsible for more than yourself." The room went still. Micah was not there. He had wisely said this was family business, though the house Caroline needed would become his home too. Ethan leaned back. "You mean when you're engaged? I mean when you have a plan." Ruth reached for his wrist. Ethan moved his hand to his lap before she could touch him. Daniel took the pen lying beside the settlement papers and tested it against his thumb, as if the main problem was ink flow. If you refuse the division, the properties may both need to be sold. Caroline loses the house. You lose the campground. Everybody loses time and money. I don't have the campground yet, Dad. You know what I mean. Ethan did know. Caroline's desire had already been turned into possession. The house was hers in every sentence. While the campground remained a theoretical gift Ethan was being difficult about accepting. Caroline looked at Roy's empty chair. Her confidence slipped for half a second. "I can keep it like he wanted," she said. Ethan wondered when Roy had told her that. He wondered if he had. Roy had mostly wanted the furnace filter changed and the Tigers to find a relief pitcher who did not make him swear. "What happens to my stuff?" Ethan asked. Caroline's eyes returned to him. "You'll have time. How much?" "We can work that out." Ruth slid the settlement closer. "Nobody expects you to disappear overnight." Ethan read the first page again. The words had not improved. Campground structures accepted as is. Responsibility for delinquent property taxes transferred with ownership. Existing business assets included. The seasonal account had not been listed among the figures Caroline had copied onto her yellow pad. Ethan noticed the omission, then decided it was probably empty. Mercer's Landing had not accepted a paying guest since June Mercer died, and Roy locked the front gate. He could refuse. The house would be listed. Caroline would blame him each time strangers walked through it. His mother would call every evening using the soft, wounded voice she reserved for problems caused by other people. His father would explain market timing. Ethan picked up the pen. Caroline exhaled before he signed. He heard it. His name looked too large on the line. Ruth gathered the papers quickly, brightening with relief. "This does not have to divide the family." "No," Ethan said. "We manage that ourselves." Daniel pushed a sandwich toward him. "Eat something." Ethan got up. Caroline followed him into the kitchen. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. That's convenient. Can you please not make me the villain because I want one stable thing?" He faced her. Caroline's eyes were wet, which made him angrier than if she had looked pleased. "You have a stable thing. You've had the same job for 8 years. You have savings. You have Micah. And you had Grandpa." The words came out small and sharp. They both looked toward the dining room. Caroline folded her arms. "Every time I called, he told me you'd handled it. Every time I came over, there was some joke between you two that I didn't understand. You lived here. You knew everything." Ethan thought of finding Roy on the bathroom floor in February, furious and half-dressed. He thought of Roy forgetting June was dead for 7 terrible minutes, then remembering all at once. "No," Ethan said, "I didn't." Caroline looked as if she might apologize. Instead, she picked up the brown coffee mug, examined a water spot on it, and set it back down. The following afternoon, Ethan returned from the marina to find his key no longer fit the front door. He tried it twice before noticing the black trash bags lying beneath the porch awning. His duffel sat on top. Beside it was the unfinished model of Roy's fishing boat, wrapped in a bath towel. Rain tapped the aluminum gutter. Caroline opened the door, but kept 1 foot behind it. "I texted you. My phone died at work. Micah's bringing some furniture tomorrow. You said I had time. I said we'd work it out. This is working it out? I packed everything carefully, in trash bags. They were clean. Ethan looked past her. 2 cardboard boxes sat in the hallway marked Donate. Roy's old red toolbox was visible in the garage. I need my tools. Those belong to Grandpa. The socket set is mine. Then we'll go through it. When? Ethan, I'm trying to set boundaries. He picked up the bags. You changed a lock. That's not a boundary. That's a lock. Their mother offered him the sofa when she heard. Ethan said no before she finished explaining that it would only be temporary. By dark, he was driving north with his belongings crammed into his truck and Roy's boat model buckled into the passenger seat. Mercer's Landing appeared behind a curtain of pines. The front gate sagged inward. Ethan cut the chain with bolt cutters from his emergency kit, then drove the weed-choked loop until his headlights found the office. Inside, the air smelled of damp paper and mouse droppings. A narrow cot stood against the back wall, still covered by the plaid blanket Roy used during long weekends. Ethan set down his bags. Tomorrow, he would call a land broker. He would photograph the lake, avoid photographing the buildings, and find out what raw acreage was worth. He slept in his clothes. At 6:43 the next morning, the phone rang. After Darlene Avery hung up, Ethan lifted the coffee tin and pulled the calendar closer. The first reservation began in 7 weeks. A second call flashed on the line. At the same moment, the old computer chimed with 3 new emails. Ethan looked from the blinking phone to the 40 blue entries in Roy's handwriting. The campground had been closed. Somehow, Grandpa Roy had reopened it without telling him. Ethan answered the second call and heard 3 men arguing before anyone spoke to him. "Tell him 4 sites," one voice said. "I know how many sites, Jerry. You told him 3 last time?" "There wasn't a last time." A third man said, "Give me the phone." Something scraped, followed by a muffled insult. Then a deeper voice came through clearly. "Morning, Ted Kessler. We've got sites 12 through 15 for September 14th. Roy said he'd keep us together." Ethan found the names on the calendar. Kessler was written in block letters across 4 squares, with auto workers beneath it. "You spoke to Roy recently?" Last month, Roy had been eating oatmeal at the kitchen table and complaining that his hip felt full of gravel. Ethan had driven him to the campground twice. Roy said he wanted to check storm damage. They had repaired the dock, replaced the fish cleaning pump, and left by lunch both times. "What exactly did he tell you?" Ethan asked. "That Mercer's Landing was opening for a short season. No activities, no camp store, just sites and cabins. We don't need much. Jerry brings enough food to survive a naval blockade." "I heard that," Jerry said in the background. Ted lowered his voice. "I heard about Roy." "I'm sorry, thank you. We figured somebody would contact us. I'm contacting you now." "No, we contacted you." Ethan closed his eyes. "That's true." Ted chuckled, then became serious again. "Are we still on?" Ethan looked at the calendar, the sagging office ceiling, and a gray clump of insulation hanging from the wall behind the filing cabinet. "I'm reviewing everything today. All right? I don't want to tell you yes until I know what I've got." That's more honest than Roy was about the mosquitoes. One of the men shouted, "Ask him about electric." "Is the electric working?" Ted asked. "I'll add it to the review." A silence opened. "We already paid deposits," Ted said. Ethan ran a finger down the square. A blue D sat beside each site number. "I see that. Good enough? Call me when you know." The old computer chimed twice more after Ethan hung up. It was a beige desktop that Roy had refused to replace because, according to him, new computers were designed by people angry at buttons. Ethan moved the mouse. The screen took so long to wake that he thought it had died. A reservation dashboard was open in the browser. Roy had saved his password on a piece of masking tape stuck to the monitor. JUNE74, with an exclamation point added in darker ink. Ethan tried not to think about whether that had been there while June was alive. The page loaded 1 row at a time. 40 confirmed bookings, not 40 individual campers. Some reservations covered couples, some groups, and the Kessler booking covered 4 sites. The first arrival was Darlene and Walt Avery in cabin 6. The final guests were scheduled to leave in late October, assuming northern Michigan decided to allow autumn instead of jumping directly to sleet. Roy had charged 25% deposits. The total came to $5,860. For half a second, the number looked like money. Then Ethan saw the refund column. The deposits were obligations wearing dollar signs. He clicked the account tab. The business checking balance was slightly higher than the deposits, but access had been frozen when the bank learned Roy had died. Ethan would need the estate documents before he could touch it. Even after that, most of the balance belonged either to guests or to the county for taxes. An email arrived with the subject line, "Accessible cabin question." Darlene, again. Ethan opened it. Attached was an old photograph of cabin 6 with Roy crouched beside a rough wooden ramp. The date in the corner was from the previous summer. Ethan remembered cutting those boards. Roy had told him they were repairing storm damage. He got up hard enough to roll the chair into the wall. Outside, morning light had begun to work its way through the pines. Mercer's Landing occupied a long curve of shoreline, with the office and store at the center. The RV loop stretched north. 8 small cabins stood to the south, spaced among balsam and birch. Even closed, the place had retained its shape. Roads still led somewhere. Numbers still waited on posts. Ethan walked toward cabin 6. The grass brushed his thighs. He passed the volleyball court, where the net had fallen and become tangled in milkweed. The recreation hall's windows were intact, though one shutter hung by a single hinge. A squirrel watched him from the roof with the proprietary attitude of an animal who had not been consulted about the transfer. Cabin 6 stood nearest the lake. The ramp had been extended from the porch, but it ended 4 inches above bare ground. 2 stacks of treated lumber lay beneath a blue tarp. Ethan lifted one corner. The boards were dry. Beside them sat a sealed box of exterior screws and 2 bags of concrete mix that had hardened into stone. Roy had not merely taken a reservation and hoped for the best. He had started the work. Ethan sat on the unfinished ramp. His anger kept changing targets. Roy, Caroline, himself, the campground, the damp blue tarp snapping in the breeze. "You could have said something," he told the empty cabin. A woodpecker hammered somewhere across the loop. Roy had been capable of astonishing stubbornness over small admissions. When June became sick, he had kept telling guests she was resting until everyone in the county knew she was in the hospital. When he stopped driving at night, he said headlights had become too bright, as if the automotive industry had forced him into retirement. Perhaps reopening the campground had been another thing he intended to announce only after proving he could do it. Or perhaps he had expected Ethan to keep doing the hard parts without being told what they were for. Ethan stood and tested the ramp with his weight. It needed a landing, railings, and probably another support beneath the turn. Not impossible, just unfinished. Everything at Mercer's Landing seemed to be one sentence short of impossible. He walked to the bathhouse. The door stuck before opening with a damp sigh. The air smelled of mineral deposits, old bleach, and something darker beneath both. Ethan found the breaker box and switched on the lights. 2 fixtures flickered. One surrendered. The men's side looked merely neglected. On the women's side, the floor flexed around the second shower drain. Ethan stepped back. A small whiteboard hung beside the utility closet. Roy had written a list in red marker. Beside pump and dock, Roy had written E and a check mark. Ethan stared at the letter. He had been part of the reopening. He just had not been informed. Back at the office, he called his mother. Ruth answered on the 5th ring, sounding breathless. "Is something wrong? Did Grandpa tell you he was reopening Mercer's Landing?" A pause. "What?" "He took 40 reservations." 40 people? Reservations. More people than that. "Are you sure they're current?" "The first one is in 7 weeks. He must have forgotten to turn something off online. He wrote them on the office calendar." Another pause. Longer this time. "Oh, Roy," she whispered. Ethan heard a cabinet close on her end. His mother cleaned when she wanted the world to stop presenting new material. "He didn't tell you?" Ethan asked. "No. He barely mentioned the campground except to complain about the taxes. He collected deposits, then refund them. I can't access the account yet. You'll be able to once everything is processed. And if the account doesn't cover all the taxes and refunds." Ruth's cabinet opened again. "Your father and I warned you the property had expenses." Ethan let the silence sit between them. "You handed it to me 48 hours ago," he said. "We did not hand it to you. You agreed, right?" "Ethan, don't take that tone." He almost asked which tone was appropriate for inheriting 40 strangers. Instead, he said, "Did Caroline know?" "Of course not." The confidence in her answer was immediate enough to convince him. Ruth softened. "Listen, this may simplify things, Cancel the bookings, sell the property, and move forward. You said yourself you aren't a campground manager. I'm not. You need something stable. There it was again. Stability. The family word for a life they could explain to other people. I have to go. Come stay here tonight. The sofa offer still stands. Tell Dad land holds value. Ethan, he hung up before his mother could turn generosity into a lecture. A truck rolled over the entrance grate. Ethan stepped outside, half expecting Caroline to arrive with another bag she had discovered in a closet. Instead, a faded green pickup came down the lane fast enough to flatten weeds. It stopped in front of the office. The woman who got out wore work boots, dark jeans, and a canvas jacket despite the warming day. Her black hair was pulled into a knot that had mostly surrendered. She looked from Ethan to the office roof, then to the missing letters on the campground sign. Please tell me you're issuing refunds, she said. Ethan recognized her after a moment. Mara Velez. You worked here for 7 summers, managed it for 4. You left. Excellent memory. The last time Ethan had seen her, she had been carrying a box out of the camp store while Roy followed behind, insisting she was overreacting. Ethan had been replacing a belt on the riding mower and had kept his head down. How did you know I was here? He asked. Darlene Avery called me after she called you. She said a confused man answered the office phone. I wasn't confused. Did you tell her whether the campground was opening? No. Then you were confused. She walked past him into the office without asking permission. Ethan followed. Mara stopped at the calendar. For several seconds she said nothing. Her posture changed before her face did. The anger remained, but it had to make room for grief. He actually did it, she said. You knew? I knew he wanted to. He took deposits. I told him not to. When? February. Ethan frowned. You were talking to him? Occasionally. Mostly when he called to tell me I'd been wrong about something. That sounds like him. He also called when the water heater quit, the dock shifted, or he couldn't remember the password to this computer. She peeled the masking tape from the monitor and held it up. June 74, Ethan said. The year they got married. Mara put the tape back exactly where she found it. He'd used it since I set up online booking. He told people he was reopening. He told me he might. I told him the bathhouse was unsafe. The south loop needed electrical work, and the well had to be tested. He said people camped for thousands of years without inspectors. Did you remind him those people died at 30? I said 28. We argued about the methodology. Ethan almost smiled. It surprised him enough that he stopped. Mara looked toward the cot, the trash bags, and the boat model strapped in the passenger seat of his truck outside. You're living here? Temporarily. Does temporarily have plumbing? It has a lake. That's not a yes. She picked up the calendar and turned the pages. Every reservation had notes beside it. Ramp. Close to bathhouse. Bringing 2 kayaks. Needs 50 amp service. Anniversary. Late arrival. Mara read them all. Then she set the calendar down. Refund the deposit, she said. Today, if you can. I can't, won't, or can't. The account is frozen. I have $1,800. Her eyes flicked to his. She had expected resistance, not arithmetic. That won't cover half. I know. Then call everyone and tell them refunds are coming. What if I open? Mara laughed once without humor. You haven't seen the South Loop. I saw the bathhouse. That's the friendly problem. I've got 7 weeks. You have 7 weeks until somebody arrives, expecting potable water, working power, safe stairs, hot showers, and the campground Roy described because he loved this place too much to describe it honestly. Ethan folded his arms. I can fix things. So could Roy. That was never the problem. She moved toward the door, then stopped. I'll come back tomorrow morning, she said, to help, to inspect everything and give you a real list. Then you can make a decision based on facts instead of grief and whatever insult your family attached to the deed. Ethan stared at her. How do you know about my family? Mara glanced at the cot again. You brought a wooden boat to a condemned campground and buckled it into your truck like a passenger. I made an educated guess. She stepped onto the porch. What time tomorrow? Ethan asked. 7. That's early. 40 reservations, she said. You're already late. Mara arrived at 6:49 with 2 coffees, a clipboard, and enough red flagging tape to mark a crime scene. You said 7, Ethan told her. I like to know whether people are awake before I trust them with electricity. I've been awake. You're wearing the same shirt. It's my inspection shirt. She handed him a coffee. It was black and hot enough to remove skin. Ethan drank anyway. Mara had divided the campground map into sections. She clipped it over a stack of blank paper and wrote 3 words across the top: safe, repair, closed. Closed is already the official category for all of it, Ethan said. This is why you carry things while I think. She gave him a tool bag and headed toward the cabins. Cabins 1 and 2 needed cleaning, new smoke alarms, and porch railings. 3 had a roof leak that had spread into the wall. Mara pushed a screwdriver into the window trim and removed it with soft brown wood clinging to the tip. That's bad, Ethan said. That's fungus. Fungus is bad. Excellent. You're learning? Cabin 4 smelled like pine cleaner and looked almost untouched. A neatly folded quilt remained at the foot of the bed, protected beneath a plastic cover. Mara stood in the doorway longer than the inspection required. June did this one, she said. The quilt? The whole cabin. Roy wanted fake wood paneling. June told him if people wanted to sleep inside a shipping crate, they could rent one cheaper. Ethan ran a finger along the windowsill. No dust. Who cleaned it? I did. Before I left. She marked cabin 4 safe, then added a question mark. What's the question? Ethan asked. Rodents, plumbing, hot water, smoke alarm, window egress, mattress condition, and whether that heater is going to carbon monoxide somebody in their sleep. That's an aggressive question mark. Cabin 5 had a cracked toilet. 6 had Darlene's unfinished ramp, but was otherwise dry. 7 needed half its porch replaced. 8 had become a luxury condominium for squirrels. Mara opened the door, saw shredded insulation, acorns, and a nest built inside the sink, then closed it again. Closed, she said. One of the reservations is for 8. Then 8's reservation isn't for 8. At the bathhouse, Ethan showed her the flexing floor. She crouched beside the drain and pressed one hand against the tile. How long has it done that? He asked. It was starting when I left. So you knew. I told Roy. Repeatedly. What did he say? That he could brace it from underneath. Could he? He could have. He didn't. She opened the utility closet and found the access panel. Beneath it, damp joists framed a dark crawl space. Ethan shone a flashlight through the opening. It's not all rotten, he said. No, only the part people stand on while wet and naked. The south loop was worse. A tree had fallen beyond Site 20 and pulled the overhead service line sideways. The tree had been removed, but the line still sagged. At Site 23, Mara unscrewed the faceplate from the electrical pedestal. Black marks spread from one breaker. Ethan leaned closer. Don't, she said. I'm looking. You look with your whole body. She replaced the faceplate. This loop stays dead until a licensed electrician signs off. I can replace a breaker. I know, you just told me not to. I also know that. That sentence didn't help. It wasn't designed to. Sites 12 through 15 were in the south loop. Ethan thought of Ted Kessler and the men debating whether they had 4 reservations or 3. They had asked about electric. Ethan had answered with a review because it sounded better than ignorance. Could we move them north? If the north pedestals work. Do they? I've been here 43 minutes, Ethan. By 9, the clipboard held 4 pages of problems. Mara had marked 3 cabins safe pending utilities, 3 repairable, and 2 closed. 21 campsites might be usable if the north loop passed inspection. The dock was solid except for one loose cleat. The fish cleaning pump worked, which earned Ethan a small check mark he pretended not to notice. The office roof needed patching before the next storm. The store refrigerator smelled like a trapped animal. The recreation hall had dry walls, good wiring, and one family of bats in the rafters. Bats eat mosquitoes, Ethan said. They also create paperwork. Everything creates paperwork with you. Paperwork is how we record which bad decisions were intentional. They sat at a picnic table near the lake. Mara placed the clipboard between them and opened a paper bag. She had brought 2 blueberry muffins. You plan aggressive inspections, Ethan said. I plan breakfast. She broke hers in half. Ethan ate his whole muffin in 4 bites. How much? He asked. For the muffin? For enough to open. Everything? 30,000, maybe more. He looked toward the cabins. For a limited season, she continued, using only the north loop and the cabins we can make safe, maybe 12 to 15. That assumes the well and septic don't surprise us. I don't have 12. You don't have two? I have 1,800. You need to live on that. I can get more hours at the marina. In 7 weeks? I've worked 7 weeks before. Mara brushed crumbs from the map. Deposits are not repair money. They're payments toward the stays. They're refundable payments. Until the guests arrive and receive what they paid for, that money belongs in the account. I know. You looked at the balance yesterday and thought about it. Ethan said nothing. Roy did the same thing, she said. He'd count reservations as revenue before anyone came through the gate. June kept a separate deposit column because she understood optimism wasn't accounting. I'm not Roy. No, but you're sitting at his picnic table considering his exact mistake. The lake shifted behind her, small waves turning silver where the sun reached them. Ethan took the clipboard and studied the map. What happened between you two? Mara looked away. Nothing dramatic enough to satisfy anybody. You walked out. I resigned. He said you overreacted. He would. He also said you tried to turn the place into a government office. That was because I bought a first aid logbook. Ethan waited. Mara folded the empty paper bag into smaller and smaller squares. After June died, he stopped maintaining things in order, she said. He'd fix whatever reminded him most of her. He painted the store because she picked the color. He rebuilt the flower boxes. Meanwhile, the bathhouse floor started moving. That sounds like him. I told him we needed to stay closed another season. He accused me of wanting the place to fail so I could prove he couldn't run it without June. Did you? Her eyes came back to him. Want to prove it? Ethan clarified. No. I wanted him to stop using grief like a maintenance plan. The words struck close enough that Ethan shifted on the bench. Then, why come back? He asked. Because Darlene called. Because 40 reservations are 40 conversations somebody has to have. Because June hired me when I was 19 and trusted me with the store before Roy trusted me with a key. You came to the funeral. I stood near the back. I didn't see you. You had other things to see. Ethan looked down at Roy's red list copied onto Mara's clean paper. The check marks beside his initial bothered him more now than they had in the bathhouse. My family thinks I should cancel and sell. Your family may be right. He laughed without meaning to. You could have waited until after the muffin. I didn't say they were right about you. They think the campground proves I don't have a real life. And what do you think it proves? That they gave Caroline the part they wanted and handed me what they didn't. That's not an answer. It's close enough. No, it's anger wearing work boots. Ethan pushed the clipboard back toward her. You've known me less than a day. I knew Roy for 15 years. He could turn resentment into enough energy to roof a building. The problem was, after the roof was finished, he was still resentful. I'm not reopening a campground for revenge. Good. I haven't decided to reopen it at all. Also good. His phone vibrated against the table. Caroline's name appeared. He considered letting it stop, then answered. Mom told me about the bookings, she said. News moves fast. You have to cancel them. Mara said the same thing. Mara, the former manager. I know who she is. Why is she there? Ethan looked across the table. Mara was labeling a page utilities and pretending not to listen. She's helping me inspect. Caroline went quiet in the particular way that meant she was editing her first response. Are you spending money already? She asked. My money. You just inherited overdue taxes, I noticed. Micah thinks you should speak to a land broker before you do anything that could complicate a sale. Micah owns exactly as much campground as I own house. I didn't say he owned it. Then his opinion should enjoy the same privacy. Mara lifted one eyebrow. Caroline exhaled. I called because I found another box of your things. Put it with the others. And your socket set is in the red toolbox. You were right. The admission was so unexpected that Ethan had no immediate reply. You can come get it, she said. Just text first. I'll come tonight. Not tonight. Micah's parents are coming over. To Grandpa's house. My house. There was no sharpness in the correction. That made it worse. Tomorrow then, Ethan said. After the call, Mara capped her marker. You don't have to prove anything to her. I need my tools. That wasn't what I said. Ethan stood. What can I do today? Order a well test. Call an electrician. Contact the insurer. Don't tell any guests the campground is opening. You said 40 conversations. I said somebody has to have them. Together they drafted an email at the old computer. Ethan rejected Mara's first version because it sounded like a funeral notice. Mara rejected his because it used the phrase minor maintenance. The floor moves, she said. Only one part. The part with the drain. He typed again. He told the reservation holders that Roy had died, ownership had changed, and the campground's condition was being assessed. He said no opening was guaranteed. Anyone who wanted to cancel would receive a full refund as soon as the estate released the business account. He read it twice before clicking send. Replies began arriving before Mara had packed her clipboard. Ted Kessler wrote, "Move us wherever the power works." A couple booked for Site 9 said they could camp without electricity. Someone named Lorna Bell asked for a phone call before making a decision. Then Darlene responded, "Walt and I can wait for your assessment. We don't need perfect. We need safe, and we need honest." Roy was wonderful, but those were not always his strongest categories. Mara read the message over Ethan's shoulder. "That sounds like Darlene. So she's staying? She's waiting. That's not canceling. It's also not opening." Ethan looked at the 40 names on the calendar. None had disappeared. Not yet. He picked up the phone to order the well test. Mara watched him dial. "One assessment," she said. "That's all I promised." Ethan nodded. Neither of them believed her. The woman at the county-approved laboratory asked Ethan whether the well served a residence, seasonal business, food establishment, or public accommodation. "Seasonal business," he said. "Currently operating? Emotionally or legally?" There was a pause. "Legally, no." She quoted $215 for collection and testing, with additional fees if they found bacteria. Do bacteria cost extra? Identifying them does. Ethan gave her his debit card number and watched 12% of his available money disappear. The electrician was worse. Glenn Pritchard had serviced Mercer's Landing when June was alive. He remembered Ethan, remembered Roy, and remembered every unpaid invoice down to the month. Roy had eventually paid them all, Glenn said, but only after treating each bill like an opening offer at a yard sale. He could inspect the North Loop Thursday afternoon. The South Loop would need more than an inspection. "How much more?" Ethan asked. "I don't price work I haven't seen." "Guess. I don't guess professionally. Guess socially. 4,000 if the line is the only problem. 7 if those pedestals are as old as I remember. They're older. Then I socially guess 7. The insurance agent asked for photographs, inspection records, occupancy numbers, and a list of recreational features. Ethan looked through the window at the dock. What counts as recreational if guests use it? The picnic tables? Not unless your guests are unusually athletic. By lunch, Ethan had spent money, promised money, and learned that the insurer considered the lake a source of possible drowning. He had not fixed a single thing. Mara sat at the other desk, with Roy's reservation notes spread around her. She had made a chart dividing the bookings by what they actually required. "You have 11 RV reservations that need electric," she said. 6 tent bookings, 12 cabins. The rest are mixed groups or multiple sites. There are only 8 cabins. Some are on different dates. Right? You need to stop hearing 40 and imagining everyone arriving at once. I'm imagining them lining up at the gate with lawyers. Campers don't bring lawyers. They bring folding chairs they can't get back into the original bags. She tapped 3 reservations. These can move from south to north if the North Loop passes. Kessler's group will lose 50 amp service, but their rigs should handle 30. Cabin 8 has to move to 5 after you replace the toilet. Cabin 5 has the cracked toilet. Thank you for identifying the thing you need to replace. Ethan leaned against the desk. "What do I owe you?" "For yesterday and this morning?" "Yes. I didn't come for money." "That isn't what I asked." Mara kept her eyes on the chart. "My assessment is free. I don't want free. You currently have $1,500 and a laboratory searching for expensive bacteria. Accept free. What if we continue?" "We? You know more about this place than I do." That sentence should frighten both of us. "How much an hour?" She put down her pen. "I have a job, Ethan." "Doing what?" "Facilities coordinator at Harbor Ridge Lodge." He knew the place. It sat 15 miles west, with stone fireplaces, expensive weddings, and a restaurant that served potatoes in portions, small enough to suggest scarcity. "So, you can do this. I can do that." At a property with a maintenance budget and functioning showers. "You came back today. I promised one assessment. You made a reservation chart. I became agitated by inefficiency." Ethan picked up the chart. It was color-coded, totaled, and cleaner than anything Roy had produced in 40 years. This is a very organized expression of agitation. Mara took it out of his hand. "Call Lorna Bell. She asked for you." Lorna answered on the first ring. Her voice was calm, exact, and older than Ethan expected. She asked how the deposits were being held, when he anticipated account access, and whether he had separate liability coverage for the property while it was closed. Ethan answered what he could and admitted what he could not. "You're not the manager who was there before," Lorna said. "Mara's here." Mara looked up sharply. "You have her helping you? She's assessing." "Put her on." Ethan held out the phone. Mara shook her head. "Lorna wants you. Lorna always wants someone." He kept holding it. Mara took the receiver. "Hello, Lorna." Her expression softened as she listened. "No, I didn't know he'd opened the calendar." "Yes, I told him that." She turned away from Ethan. "I know what the weekend means. That doesn't make the water safe." After another minute, she handed the phone back. Lorna sighed. "Mara and I have met, I gathered. My husband and I used to take Site 9 every October. After he died, I kept the reservation. Different weekends now. Same site when it's available. I'm sorry, thank you. Dan's been gone 6 years. Grief no longer requires everyone to whisper." Ethan glanced at Mara. She was carefully realigning the edge of the reservation chart with the desk. "I can issue the refund once the account opens," he said. "I did not request one. Your email asked for a call, because I wanted to know if you understood that taking money from guests creates a liability. I understand." "Do you?" "I'm beginning to." "Good. I'll wait until you have the well result and the electrical inspection. Then I'll decide." She ended the call before Ethan could offer a more graceful goodbye. "Friendly," he said. "She was an accountant for 38 years. That explains the warmth. She likes you. She threatened me with the meaning of liability. That is how Lorna likes people." Mara gathered her papers and checked the time. "I have to go to Harbor Ridge. You're coming back?" "I left my good marker." "That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting." Ethan spent the afternoon clearing the office roof. Pine needles had collected behind the chimney, flashing, and held enough moisture to soften the shingles. He replaced a narrow strip with leftover bundles he found in the maintenance shed. The color did not match. Neither did the replacement boards beneath the eave, but the next rain would stay outside. At 5, he drove to Roy's house for his tools. Caroline opened the door before he knocked. She wore loose gray pants and one of Roy's old work shirts over her blouse. Dust streaked her cheek. "You're early," she said. "It's 5. You said after 5. It's after 4:59. She stepped aside. Micah's leather sofa occupied the living room where Roy's faded green couch had been. The room looked larger and less comfortable. Boxes stood along one wall, each labeled in Caroline's careful handwriting. Keep, donate, Ethan, garage. Grandpa Roy's chair was gone. Ethan stopped inside the doorway. "Where is it?" "Where's what?" "His chair. In the basement." "Why?" "It smells like him." Caroline said it flatly, but her hand tightened around the edge of the door. "That's usually why people keep things," Ethan said. "I couldn't sit in here with it." "So, you put it downstairs. I didn't throw it away." He started toward the basement. "Ethan, your tools are in the garage. I know where the basement is." She moved in front of him. "I'm asking you not to rearrange my house." He looked at her, then at Roy's shirt hanging open over her office clothes. "You rearranged it." "Yes," she said. "Because if I didn't, it still looked like he was coming back." That answer slowed him. Caroline walked to the garage without checking whether he followed. On Roy's workbench, she had placed Ethan's socket set, 2 ratchets, a torque wrench, and a canvas roll of screwdrivers. Everything was cleaner than when he last used it. "I wiped them down," she said. "I see that. The red toolbox is Grandpa's." So it was in the garage when the property transferred." Ethan gave a short laugh. "You're keeping his tools based on real estate law now?" "I'm keeping them because Micah can use them. Micah called a handyman to hang a mirror. The mirror weighed 80 pounds. I need the circular saw. You have your own." "It's at the marina, and it belongs to the marina." Caroline crossed her arms. "You're not taking everything useful out of the house because you decided to play Campground." His hand stopped above the socket set. "Play. That's not what I meant. It was a complete sentence. You signed the agreement knowing the campground needed work. I didn't know Grandpa had 40 guests waiting. Neither did I. But you knew I was sleeping out there when you changed the locks." Caroline looked toward the driveway. Her voice dropped. "I thought you'd stay with Mom. You thought Mom would absorb the ugly part, and then you wouldn't have to feel like you put me out. I did not put you out. The house became mine. Those two things can both be true." Her eyes filled, but she did not turn away this time. "The roof estimate is $22,000, she said. "The plumbing under the kitchen is corroded. The basement gets water when it rains. You keep talking like I got handed a palace. You got handed a place to sleep. And you got land assessed higher than this house. There are squirrels living in the sink. Then sell it." Ethan put his tools into the canvas bag. Caroline reached for Roy's circular saw, hesitated, then set it on the bench between them. "Borrow it," she said. "Bring it back." He picked it up. "Thank you." She nodded as if the word cost her something. Before he left, she gave him a cardboard box marked Ethan. Inside were 2 winter sweaters, a phone charger, Roy's old thermos, and 6 photographs. One showed Ethan and Roy standing on the campground dock the previous summer, both squinting into the sun. Roy had one hand on Ethan's shoulder. Caroline had placed the photograph face down. Ethan drove directly to the marina and worked until after midnight, replacing a bilge pump in a cabin cruiser, whose owner referred to every wire as that little guy. The overtime would cover the well test, but his hands cramped around the steering wheel on the drive back. Mara's green pickup was parked beside the office. She sat on the porch under the repaired section of roof, drinking from Roy's thermos. Ethan had left it on the desk with the box. "You stole my inheritance?" he said. "Your coffee is terrible." "I didn't make coffee." "I know. I tried." She pointed to a plastic sample bottle on the desk. The laboratory collector had come while he was gone. "They took the water? At 3. You were here?" "I retrieved my marker. Of course." Mara had also brought copies of the campground's last inspection reports from a file she kept after leaving. Nothing in them solved the current problems, but they showed where shutoff valves, service lines, and septic access points were located. "You kept these?" Ethan asked. Roy threw paperwork into drawers based on emotional significance. "That's not a filing system." "I know." The laboratory called the next afternoon. The well had tested positive for coliform bacteria. Not dangerous by itself, the woman explained, but evidence that surface contamination might be entering the system. The well would need to be disinfected, flushed, inspected for defects, and sampled again. Until it passed, the water could not be served to guests. Ethan wrote down the instructions and the new fees. Mara watched from the other side of the desk. When he hung up, she held out her hand for the paper. "This is where you cancel," she said. Ethan looked through the window at cabin 6. The blue tarp moved above the unfinished ramp. "How long to disinfect and retest? If there isn't a deeper problem, a week, and if there is, longer." More money, he handed her the result. "Then we start with a week." "We?" Mara asked. Ethan took the laboratory instructions back from her. "You've been here 4 days. I've retrieved the same marker several times. It must be a very important marker. It writes on wet surfaces. Stay until the well is clean." That is not a sentence people usually use as a job offer. Ethan sat at the desk and opened the notebook where he had begun recording every expense. $20 an hour, 8 hours a week. "I pay you when the business account is released." "No, I know it isn't much. It's not enough, and you don't get to solve that by increasing the hours while decreasing the rate. I have $1,500. You had $1,800 when I met you. I've accomplished things. You've purchased information. Information is a thing." Mara pulled the notebook toward herself. She wrote beneath his offer. $22 an hour, maximum 8 hours weekly, time recorded, payment deferred until estate funds are available. Either party may stop crying at any time. Ethan read the last line. "Quit," Mara said. "I meant quit." "You wrote crying. I know what I wrote." He signed beneath it. Mara added her name, tore out a copy, and folded it into her jacket pocket. "Congratulations," Ethan said. "You work at Mercer's Landing again. For 8 hours a week. You're already over that. I start now." She looked at the laboratory result. First, we find out why the well failed. The metal cap was buried beneath weeds behind the store. Ethan cleared around it while Mara called the company that had serviced it in the past. The owner remembered the system and said Roy had skipped the recommended spring inspection twice. "He skipped spring," Mara said after hanging up. That was his plan. Spring kept coming at bad times. The well company could send someone Monday. The visit, disinfection, and initial inspection would cost $600, not including repairs. Ethan stared at the estimate. I can disinfect a well, he said. You can pour bleach into a hole, that's most of it. You don't know whether the casing is cracked. I can inspect the cap and visible casing. And if the problem is underground, then I pay somebody. Mara leaned against the store wall. This is the part where you decide that saving money is worth risking the second sample. I'm deciding whether there's a safe part I can do myself. That sounded almost responsible. Write it down. They compromised by paying the company for the inspection and doing the flushing themselves. Ethan disliked the word compromise because it still cost $400. Mara disliked it because he smiled when the price dropped. Glenn Pritchard arrived for the electrical inspection in a white van with Pritchard Electric painted on the side and a small plastic skeleton zip-tied to the grill. Previous customer? Ethan asked. Did his own wiring. Glenn was a narrow man in his 60s with hearing protection resting around his neck. He walked the north loop slowly, opened each pedestal, tested outlets, and said almost nothing. Ethan followed with Roy's red toolbox. Caroline had texted twice that morning to remind him the saw was borrowed, but she had not mentioned the toolbox. Ethan had left it at the house anyway. At Site 9, Glenn replaced a cover plate and pointed to a wasp nest inside the post. Electric problem? Ethan asked. Depends where they build next. At Site 17, a receptacle had pulled loose. 19 needed a new breaker. The main panel was old, but serviceable. Glenn wrote his findings on a carbon copy form and calculated materials. 2,300 for the north loop, he said. More if I find something once we open the panel. Ethan ran a hand over his face. Can I do any of the labor? You can dig. You can remove the damaged pedestals after I disconnect them. You can install posts. You cannot touch what could kill you. That's a broad category. Electricity helps define it. And south? Glenn looked down the road at the sagging line. Leave it off. For how long? Until you have money. Mara stood beside Site 12 with the reservation chart. We can run the season without South. Not all the reservations. We move 6. Cancel 1 if cabin 5 isn't ready. Everyone else fits. Ethan looked at the quiet loop. Pine needles covered the fire rings. A rusted horseshoe lay beside Site 15, half buried in dirt. Closing half the campground felt like failure until he remembered all of it was currently closed. What do you need as a deposit? He asked Glenn. Materials. How much? About $1,200. Ethan had $1,486 in checking. Can I pay Friday? Glenn looked at him for a long time. Roy still owes me an apology. For what? He told everyone I wired the recreation hall backward. Can a building be wired backward? No. Then he probably owes you too. Glenn folded the yellow copy of the estimate and handed it over. Friday. Ethan worked 2 additional marina shifts. He repaired a starter motor, changed oil in 3 boats, and crawled into an engine compartment so narrow the owner had to pull him out by the ankles. His paycheck covered Glenn's materials with $38 left over. He slept in pieces. On the night Mara found him patching the ramp at cabin 6 by the light of his truck, she switched off his saw at the extension cord. The sudden silence made the lake seem loud. What are you doing? Ethan asked. Preventing a man who has been awake since 5 from removing a finger. I'm not near my fingers. You are always near your fingers. He set the saw down. The well inspector comes Monday. Glenn starts Tuesday. The retest has to be collected 48 hours after flushing. I have to finish the landing before Darlene comes. Darlene's reservation is 6 weeks away. She called. She and Walt are coming Saturday to look at it. Mara stared at him. You invited a guest to inspect unfinished work? She asked. That is not a defense. I told her it wasn't done. What did she say? She said she had eyes. Mara picked up the board he had been measuring and carried it into cabin 6. We're stopping. I can finish the cut. You can barely finish a sentence. I've finished several tonight. None were good. He followed her inside. The cabin smelled of old wood and the lemon cleaner Mara had used on the counters. She turned on a camping lantern and placed it on the table. A red vinyl guest book lay in one drawer. Ethan opened it while she checked his measurements. The entries went back 18 years. Some were written in careful paragraphs. Others said only Great Lake or too many mosquitoes. A guest named Walt Avery had written on 3 separate visits. Darlene still claims she caught the bigger fish. Darlene had added beneath the final one, because I did. You knew they'd been coming that long? Ethan asked. Longer. Cabin 6 became theirs after Walt's legs got worse. Before that, they tented near the point. What happened? To his legs? Ethan nodded. Industrial accident. Years ago? He uses forearm crutches now. Grandpa should have finished the ramp before taking their deposit, yes. He had me cut the boards, I know. He never told me who they were for. Mara sat across from him. Roy thought asking for help meant giving someone the chance to say no. That's ridiculous. He considered no a personal attack. Ethan turned another page. Darlene's handwriting filled half of it with an account of a storm that had trapped everyone in the recreation hall. June had made grilled cheese on camp stoves. Roy had tried to lead a sing-along and discovered he knew only the first line of every song. Ethan smiled despite himself. He left me the promise, he said. No. Your family left you the property. Roy left promises lying all over it. That's worse. Yes. Mara examined his face. When did you last sleep? At the marina. That is not what I asked. 3 hours yesterday, maybe 4 the night before. If I come back Saturday and you've cut anything after midnight, I quit. You can't quit over a saw. I can quit over stupidity. I'll sleep. Tonight. Yes. In the cot, not your truck. Yes. Say it like a person who means it. Ethan closed the guest book. You're using your 8 hours very aggressively. I stopped recording time at 6. That violates our crying contract. Go to bed. Darlene and Walt arrived Saturday in a silver SUV with a cargo carrier on the back and 2 aluminum forearm crutches laid across the rear seat. Ethan had finished the ramp landing that morning. It still needed rails, a second coat of stain, and concrete around one support, but it reached the ground without a 4-inch drop. Darlene got out first. She was short, broad-shouldered, and wore a visor embroidered with a walleye. Walt took longer. He placed each crutch carefully before shifting his weight out of the passenger seat. You're Ethan, Darlene said. Yes, you got taller. I was 16 the last time you saw me. You were also hiding behind the store every time Roy needed somebody to wear the moose costume. Ethan had forgotten the campground owned a moose costume. Walt reached the ramp and tested the incline. Needs a rail. It's getting 2. Good. He climbed slowly. Darlene watched his feet, pretending not to. Inside the cabin, she opened cupboards, ran one finger along a shelf, and checked the mattress. You're inspecting harder than Mara, Ethan said. Mara learned from me. From the porch, Walt looked across the lake. Roy promised a quiet reopening, he said. That part I can guarantee. You guaranteeing quiet neighbors? I'm guaranteeing half the campground has no electricity. Walt smiled. Ethan explained the well, the bathhouse floor, and the electrical limits. He offered again to refund their deposit. Darlene looked at him as if he had suggested setting fire to the cabin. We drove an hour and a half to see whether you were lying, she said. You're not. You're just tired. I slept last night. Congratulations. She returned to the SUV and removed 2 paint cans, brushes, and a bag of rags. What's that? Ethan asked. The picnic tables look terrible in your photographs. You brought paint? Roy bought the wrong color last year and gave it to us because Walt said something rude. It was bright orange, Walt said. This is brown. You don't have to do that, Ethan told them. Darlene set a paint can on the nearest table. I don't have to do much of anything anymore. That's why I like choosing. They painted 4 tables before lunch. Walt worked from a folding chair, sanding rough edges while Darlene covered the wood in dark brown stain. Ethan repaired loose boards beside them. Mara arrived carrying sandwiches from the same deli Caroline had used for the inheritance meeting. She saw the Averys, the paint, and Ethan's expression. You invited volunteers, she said. I did not. Good, Darlene called. Because we charge by the complaint. The picnic tables were mismatched, the ramp remained unfinished, the well still contained chlorine strong enough to smell from the outdoor spigots. But for the first time since Ethan arrived, voices crossed the campground without sounding lost. When the Averys left, Darlene kept their reservation. She also left the remaining paint. The brown paint did not match any existing table. It was darker than the old stain and lighter than the newer benches Roy had built from cedar. Ethan used it anyway. By Monday, 6 tables formed an uneven row beside the recreation hall, their wet surfaces shining in the morning sun. Mara arrived while he was painting the 7th. You know they don't have to match, she said. They should look intentional. Nothing here has ever looked intentional. That's not true. She pointed at the campground sign, which now read, Mercer's Land, NG. Wynn took the I. Did Wynn take the apostrophe? Grandpa hated punctuation. Mara set down her bag. The well company is here. The inspector found no cracks in the visible casing. The cap had not been sealed properly after Roy's last repair, and insects had collected beneath it. He replaced the gasket, inspected the surrounding ground, and said the contamination might have come from spring runoff. Might? Ethan asked. We know after the second test. We paid for the first test to know. You paid to know it failed. The inspector added chlorine, circulated the system, and left Ethan with instructions to flush every fixture until the bleach smell disappeared. It took most of the day. Ethan opened every cabin tap, the bathhouse showers, the store sink, and the outdoor spigots. Chlorinated water ran across gravel and into the grass. The whole center of the campground smelled like a public swimming pool. Darlene emailed to ask how the ramp rails were coming. Ted Kessler called to say his group could bring extension cords if necessary. Mara took the phone from Ethan. No, she said. You cannot run 4 RVs on extension cords. A voice loud enough to carry through the receiver asked why not. Because I would like the campground to remain above ground. She hung up and wrote electric adapters on the supply list. You're good with guests, Ethan said. I haven't threatened anyone since lunch. Glenn began work on the north loop the next morning. Ethan dug around 3 pedestal posts, removed rotted wood, and installed replacements while Glenn handled the wiring. Mara used the office computer to move reservations from the south loop. Each change required a call. Most people accepted alternate sites. One couple with a large fifth wheel said Site 19 was too short and wanted their deposit returned. Ethan wrote their names under refund and felt something inside him drop. It was the first reservation lost. 20 minutes later, Mara found a note in Roy's calendar showing that the couple had originally requested a smaller site and upgraded only because Roy promised the South Loop would open. They accepted Site 11 after all. Ethan erased the word refund so hard he tore the paper. Don't do that, Mara said. They're staying. I mean, don't treat every cancellation like a verdict. It wasn't a cancellation. Then you'll have to save that lesson for later. He taped the page from behind. The estate documents cleared the business account by Wednesday. Ethan drove into town, expecting the bank balance to feel different once he could legally access it. It did not. $6,342 sat in the account. $5,860 represented deposits. The rest would not cover even one of the outstanding campground bills. He opened a separate ledger and wrote guest deposits. Do not spend across the top. At the marina, Ethan had seen owners delay repairs until the boats became dangerous. They always used the same reasoning. They had already paid so much. They were almost finished. One more temporary fix could get them through the season. He was beginning to understand how easily almost could become a financial philosophy. When he returned, Daniel's SUV was parked beside the recreation hall. His father stood behind a pressure washer, blasting gray dirt from the concrete patio. He wore khaki shorts, white athletic shoes, and protective glasses. The shoes were already speckled brown. Ethan got out of his truck. What are you doing? Daniel released the trigger. This concrete was black. I know. Your mother sent chicken salad. Of course she did. A cooler sat in the shade. Ruth sent food whenever conversation had failed to produce the desired result. Daniel looked around. Glenn's van was at Site 17. Electrical boxes and lengths of conduit lay on a tarp. The newly painted picnic tables dried beneath the trees. You've done a lot, he said. Mara made a list. The campground manager, former manager, current temporary operations consultant. Daniel nodded as if that answered more than it did. Your mother said she came back. Mom has a strong intelligence network. She talks to Caroline. Same thing. Daniel removed his protective glasses. His eyes looked tired behind them. Your sister's having a rough week. Her house kick her out? Ethan. Then our weeks are different. The roofer found more damage around the chimney. Your mother and I are helping with the deposit. Good. Daniel waited for more. Ethan picked up the pressure washer wand and inspected the nozzle. This thing leaks. I borrowed it from Stan. Stan doesn't believe in maintenance. Stan believes maintenance is something manufacturers use to sell filters. Ethan tightened the hose fitting by hand and gave it back. Daniel put the glasses on again, but did not restart the machine. We can't do for both of you what we're doing for Caroline, he said. I didn't ask you to. I know. Then why say it? Because this looks expensive. It is. And because if you get halfway through and need help, I don't want you thinking we chose her. Ethan stared at him. You paid her roof deposit before I asked for anything. She has a house to protect. I have 40 reservations. You can refund those. I can't refund her roof. Daniel's face tightened. Don't turn every practical decision into proof we love your sister more. I don't have to turn it. You keep bringing it over already assembled. The pressure washer motor idled between them. Daniel looked toward the lake. I came to help. I know. You make that difficult. I know. For the next 2 hours, they cleaned the patio without speaking. Daniel worked carefully, moving each chair rather than spraying around it. Ethan cleared leaves from the recreation hall gutters. When the machine ran out of fuel, his father had brought an extra can. Before leaving, Daniel opened the cooler and gave Ethan 2 containers of chicken salad, a loaf of bread, 6 apples, and a jar of pickles. Your mother thinks you're not eating, he said. Mara thinks I'm not sleeping. Are either of them wrong? Not completely. Daniel placed the empty fuel can in the SUV. This place was good once, he said. Ethan looked at him. Daniel rarely spoke about Mercer's Landing. He had married into the family after Roy and June had already been running it for a decade. Roy respected Daniel's reliability and distrusted his clean fingernails. You liked it here? Ethan asked. I liked your mother here. She was different. Different how? She laughed louder. Daniel glanced toward the recreation hall as if expecting to hear it. Sell before it takes everything, he said quietly. That's all I'm asking you to consider. Then he got into the SUV and drove out. Glenn finished the North Loop late Thursday. He had replaced 3 breakers, 6 receptacles, and 1 section of damaged conduit. The work came in $200 under his estimate, which Glenn described as proof God occasionally visits electrical systems. At sunset, he stood beside the main panel with Ethan and Mara. Go ahead, Glenn said. Ethan raised the disconnect. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the pedestal at Site 9 lit green. Another light appeared at 11, then 12. Down the curve of the loop, small green indicators came on one after another beneath the pines. Mara walked to the nearest pedestal and plugged in a tester. All correct, Glenn said. I trust you, she replied. No, you don't. I respect you. That's cheaper. Ethan walked down the loop. 21 sites had power. Not temporary power, not extension cords from the store, not something Roy had declared good enough after jiggling a breaker. Working power. At Site 15, the green light shone beside the old horseshoe. Ethan bent and pulled the rusted metal from the ground. He set it on top of the pedestal. Don't make that a decoration, Mara called. It has history. It has tetanus. Glenn handed Ethan the final invoice. The remaining balance was $1,100, due in 30 days. Ethan folded it and placed it in his pocket. The laboratory collected the second water sample Friday morning. Results would take up to 48 hours. Ethan tried not to call before lunch. He lasted until 11:15. No result yet, the woman said. What time do bacteria usually report? They don't keep office hours. Mara made him go repair porch railings. The insurance quote arrived while he was working on cabin 2. Conditional coverage required the well to pass, the bathhouse repairs to be completed, the south loop to remain physically closed, and all occupied cabins to meet the insurer's safety requirements. The seasonal premium was manageable. The down payment was $2,700. Ethan read the number twice. Mara sat on the porch step beside him. You expected it. I expected less. Everyone expects less from insurance. He handed her his expense notebook. With the electrical balance, well service, retest, bathhouse materials, toilets, smoke alarms, extinguishers, cabin repairs, and insurance, the limited reopening would cost at least $11,400. That did not include Mara's wages or the county taxes. Against it, Ethan had his marina paychecks, $482 of campground money not tied to deposits, and whatever labor he could perform himself. The gap was more than $7,000. If the guests pay their remaining balances before arrival? No, Mara said. I'm not suggesting we spend deposits. That is exactly where the sentence was going. We need revenue. You need a business capable of earning it. He closed the notebook. Across the loop, the green power indicators remained lit in daylight. small and unnecessary now that the sun was up. The laboratory called at 4:30. The second sample was clean. Ethan wrote pass beside well sample on Roy's whiteboard. Then he stood back and looked at what remained. Mara came into the office and saw the mark. For once, she did not qualify it. She took Roy's red marker, drew a clean line through well sample, and recapped the pen. 1 safe system, she said. 21 powered sites, 3 usable cabins, 6 repairable, 5 repairable. You are not evicting the squirrels from 8 before winter. Fine. The campground was becoming possible 1 expense at a time. That was not the same as affordable. Mara attacked the budget with a red pen. Cabin 3 stays closed, she said. I can repair the wall. You can repair the wall after you repair the roof that leaked into the wall. I patched it. You patched the office. I can patch 3. With which money? Ethan looked at the notebook. Mara crossed cabin 3 off the opening list. 7 needs a porch, he said. That's boards and labor. It needs a porch, steps, railings, a toilet seal, and half the screens replaced. I can do all of that. You cannot do all of everything. That's not a real sentence. It is your business plan. They worked at the registration desk while rain tapped the patched office roof. Nothing dripped. Ethan had placed a bucket beneath the old leak anyway, which Mara called an emotional support bucket. Cabin 8 had already been surrendered to the squirrels. 3 and 7 joined it on the closed list. That left 5 cabins if Ethan repaired the toilet in 5 and completed the ramp at 6. The 12 cabin reservations did not overlap as badly as he feared. 3 could be moved to different cabins without changing dates. 2 groups had requested larger cabins that the campground did not actually possess, because Roy had described Cabin 7's narrow side room as a second bedroom. It contains a bed, Ethan said. It contains a mattress positioned beside a water heater. Grandpa valued efficiency. Grandpa valued descriptions nobody could prosecute. Mara called the affected guests. The first couple agreed to Cabin 2, after she promised it had a functioning porch and no exposed machinery. A pair of sisters scheduled for Cabin 3 accepted Cabin 5 once Ethan confirmed there was space beside it to park their fishing trailer. The Cabin 8 reservation belonged to a man named Vernon Shaw, who listened silently while Ethan explained the squirrel occupation. Are they paying? Vernon asked. They're behind on rent. Put us anywhere with a roof. Ethan moved him to Cabin 4. Nobody canceled. Mara circled the reduced cabin repair figure. Closing 3 buildings removed nearly $2,000 from the immediate budget. Repairing the bathhouse floor without remodeling the showers saved another $1,000. Glenn agreed that the South Loop could be blocked with posts and chain instead of the new gate listed in the insurer's estimate. The gap shrank to $4,100. That's 4 weeks at the marina if they keep giving me overtime, Ethan said. That's 4 weeks if you don't eat, buy fuel, or discover another problem. Mom brought chicken salad. The campground cannot depend on your mother's mayonnaise. Why not? It has excellent credit. Mara lowered the pen. You are joking because the number still scares you. I'm joking because the alternative is listening to you. He took the notebook and added the cost of fuel. Mara smiled despite trying not to. The bathhouse floor opened more cleanly than either of them expected. Ethan removed the tile around the damaged drain, cut away the soft subfloor, and exposed 2 joists. One needed reinforcement. The other was solid. The source of the damage was not the shower itself. The downspout outside emptied against the foundation. Years of runoff had worked beneath the sill and kept the floor damp. They needed drainage before they closed it again. Mara stood in the trench Ethan had begun digging by hand and looked toward the tree line where the water needed to go. At your current rate, she said, you'll reach that slope during snow season. I'm enjoying the soil. You've been on the same rock for 10 minutes. It knows what it did. His phone rang in his pocket. Ted Kessler was calling for the 3rd time that week. We found adapters, Ted announced. You found the approved kind? Mara there? She's in a hole. Put her on. Ethan looked at Mara. She held out her hand. He trusts me. He fears you. That is a type of trust. Ted had found the right adapters and wanted to confirm the North Loop voltage. Before Mara could finish, another voice began shouting about a trencher. She pulled the phone away from her ear. Who owns a trencher? Jerry, Ted said. Why? He owns a rental yard. Mara looked down at the muddy shovel in Ethan's hands. How wide? After a debate on the other end, Ted said, 6-inch chain, 18-inch depth. Why? Ethan took the phone. What does Jerry charge? Charge who? Me. More argument followed. Jerry eventually came on. You need it one day? He asked. Probably half. Pick it up Friday, bring it back Saturday. Put fuel in it. What's the rate? You're holding our deposits. That's not payment for equipment. No, that's payment for camping. Then give me the rate. Jerry seemed offended by the question. Don't make this weird. I'm not taking free equipment from a guest. It's not free. You're returning it clean. Jerry, fine, $40. The listed daily rate on Jerry's website was $185. Ethan knew because Mara had already looked. 100, he said. 60. 80. Done. Jerry added, and don't comp our sites. Ted keeps trying to get us comped because he thinks helping makes him important. In the background, Ted denied this. They used the trencher Friday afternoon. Ethan cut a clean line from the bathhouse down the slope, installed perforated pipe, and surrounded it with gravel. Mara rerouted the downspout and stood with a hose at the foundation, while Ethan watched water emerge 20 yards away. Working drainage, he said. Do not become emotionally attached to a pipe. It solved a problem. That is the minimum requirement for a pipe. On Saturday morning, Caroline arrived for the circular saw. She parked behind Ethan's truck and remained in her car long enough to look around. The last time she had seen Mercer's Landing, weeds covered the entrance and the sign still had its eye. Now the road shoulders had been cut, the picnic tables were brown, and 3 powered RV pedestals showed green lights beneath the trees. Ethan was installing blocking beneath the bathhouse floor. Caroline stood in the doorway wearing jeans, ankle boots, and a raincoat too clean for the room. You said you'd bring the saw back, she said. I said I'd borrow it. You've had it 9 days. I've used it every day. Micah needs it for the basement shelves. Micah can borrow a saw from someone whose home does not require one. Her gaze dropped to the open section of floor. Is that mold? Rot? That's better? It's cheaper. Caroline stepped carefully around the tools. Mom said the water failed. It passed the second test. And the electricity? North Loop is done. Who paid for that? Me. With what? Money? I'm not trying to interrogate you. You're standing in a bathroom asking financial questions. She folded her arms. The estate account is accessible now. The guest deposits are accessible. They're not mine to spend yet. Caroline's expression changed slightly. I'm glad you understand that. Ethan stood. You thought I'd steal them? I thought Grandpa might have spent some. He didn't. I know that now. No, you said you're glad I understand. You've never run a business, Ethan. Neither have you. I handle commercial claims every day, and that makes you qualified to decide I'm dishonest? That is not what I said. It was another one of your incomplete sentences. Caroline looked past him toward the lake. Mara was sealing Cabin 6's ramp while talking on her phone. Glenn's replaced pedestals stood straight along the north loop. The recreation hall patio was clean. You're really doing it, Caroline said. I'm trying. You always try things. The old contempt was there, but something else sat underneath it. Fear, perhaps, or the discomfort of watching a family story refuse to behave. What's that supposed to mean? Ethan asked. You rebuilt that motorcycle for 8 months and sold it before you finished. You started the welding course. You took the marina job because you said it might lead somewhere, then cut your hours for Grandpa. He needed me, I know. You say that like it was a bad decision. I say it like you always get to be the person with a reason. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag. You wanted the house. Yes, you got it. Yes. Why are you still mad? Caroline's eyes moved to him. Because you signed like we forced you, she said. You walked out like I had stolen something. Now every time Mom talks about you, she sounds guilty. Dad spent a day pressure washing your patio and came home acting like I'd done something wrong by needing a roof. You put my belongings outside. I packed them. You changed the lock. It was my house. Those are facts, Caroline. They don't become accusations just because you don't like how they sound. Her jaw tightened. Give me the saw, she said. Ethan walked past her, unplugged the circular saw, and brushed sawdust from its case. For 9 days he had treated the tool like part of the campground's repair plan. It was not. He handed it over. Caroline took the case, but her grip loosened when she felt its weight. Do you have another one? She asked. No. How are you finishing this? Rental. That costs money. So do basement shelves. She looked embarrassed. It lasted only a moment. Micah already bought the lumber. Then he should protect his investment. Caroline carried the saw to her car. Before leaving, she walked to the office and returned with Roy's thermos. Ethan had left it beside the coffee machine. "This was in your box," she said. "I know. You should wash it. The seal smells terrible. It smells like coffee. It smells like Grandpa's truck." Again, they found themselves standing near a thing that held too much of him. Caroline placed the thermos on the bathhouse counter. "I didn't put the photograph face down," she said. Ethan knew which photograph she meant. It was like that in Grandpa's desk. Why? I don't know. He watched her leave without asking more. The question followed him through the afternoon. Roy's hand on his shoulder, both of them standing on the dock after finishing repairs that Ethan had not known were part of an opening plan. A picture turned face down where Caroline had found it. Mara caught him measuring the same board twice. "What did your sister want? Her saw?" "Her saw? The saw that came with her house. That sounds like a healthy and reasonable category." She said the picture from the dock was face down in Grandpa's desk. Mara waited. "I thought she did it. You wanted her to have done it." "I didn't want that. It fit." Ethan marked the board. Why would Grandpa turn it over? Maybe it fell. Maybe he spilled coffee. Maybe looking at it hurt. That's not an answer. No, it's 3 answers, and you don't know which one is true. They closed the bathhouse floor before dark using a rented saw. The drain sat firm beneath Ethan's weight. The new tile did not match the old, though it came close enough that Mara called it barely offensive. In the office, Ethan rewrote the budget. With reduced repairs, extra marina shifts, and no new failure, he could reach the insurance down payment before the deadline. He would still owe Glenn, Mara, and the supplier. The campground would open carrying bills before it earned $1. Mara read the figures twice. "This is possible," she said. It was the first time she had used that word. Ethan opened the reservation email list. 40 names waited. He wrote that Mercer's Landing intended to honor the limited autumn season. He explained the closed South Loop, the reduced cabin capacity, and the services that would not be available. He offered refunds again. Then he clicked send. Lorna Bell replied first. "Possible is not the same as wise. I am keeping Site 9. By midnight, all 40 reservations remained. The replies kept arriving. Some guests asked whether they could bring tools. One offered a portable generator. Another said she owned 12 fitted sheets that no longer matched her mattress and wanted to donate them. Ted Kessler proposed arriving 2 days early with Jerry and the useful half of the group. Mara rejected the generator, the early arrivals, and 8 of the 12 sheets. "Why only 8?" Ethan asked. "Because 4 are pink satin. Cabinate squirrels might like them. They have enough." She accepted the plain sheets after confirming they were clean. She allowed Ted's group to arrive at noon instead of 3, but only if they understood they were guests, not unpaid maintenance workers. Ted replied, "We contain multitudes." "What does that mean?" Ethan asked. "It means he discovered the internet. Mercer's Landing changed in pieces too small to impress anyone on a single afternoon. The railing at Cabin 6 became sturdy. Cabin 5 received a toilet that did not rock. Smoke alarms appeared above beds. Fire extinguishers were mounted in every usable cabin and along the North Loop. Ethan replaced screens while Mara inventoried blankets, tested keys, and discarded 37 expired packets of cocoa from the store. Roy had priced them at 50 cents each. "Vintage," Ethan said. "Poison. Cocoa doesn't become poison. Then drink one." He read the date and threw them away. Lorna Bell requested the operating budget on a Sunday evening. Ethan stared at her email. "Why?" "Because you told 40 reservation holders you intend to open," Mara said. "Lorna considers intention a suspicious financial category. I'm not sending a guest my accounts." "Then call her and say no." "He called," Lorna answered. "You forgot trash." "Hello to you too." "Your email listed limited services. It did not mention waste removal." "I have a dumpster." "You have a rusted container last emptied 3 years ago," Mara told me. Ethan looked across the desk. Mara did not look guilty. "I'm arranging pickup," he said. "You also need propane, septic pumping, merchant fees, cleaning supplies, firewood, and money to winterize after the final reservation. Opening is not the last expense of opening. Are you trying to convince me to cancel your reservation? I'm trying to avoid arriving at Site 9 and finding you've burned the picnic tables for heat." He sent her the budget. She returned it the next morning, with comments in the margins and a second page titled, "Costs That Still Exist When You Are Tired of Them." Ethan disliked the title because it was accurate. Lorna had added $1,800 in expenses over the first 3 months, most of them ordinary enough to feel insulting. Toilet paper, credit card processing, propane delivery, gravel, light bulbs, replacement fire rings. A reserve for the pump Ethan had repaired because repaired equipment did not become immortal. At the bottom, she had written, "If every reservation stays and no major equipment fails, this season may pay its direct costs. It will not pay you properly. Decide whether that is acceptable before exhaustion decides for you." Ethan left the page beneath Roy's whiteboard. Mara found it there and said nothing. The marina began keeping him until 1 in the morning. Cal Benton, the service manager, had 3 technicians out during the busiest repair week of the summer, and Ethan wanted every hour. He replaced alternators, rebuilt carburetors, and learned to eat sandwiches while lying beneath engines. On Thursday night, he installed a fuel hose without tightening the second clamp. Cal caught it during the pressure test. The leak sprayed gasoline across the engine compartment before either of them started the motor. No fire, no damage, just a sharp chemical smell, and Cal's hand closing around Ethan's shoulder. "Outside," Cal said. "I can fix it. Outside now." They stood behind the service building beneath a light full of moths. Ethan's hands smelled like fuel even after he wiped them. Cal was in his 50s, broad through the chest, with the permanent tan line of someone who wore sunglasses on top of his head. "When did you sleep?" he asked. "I'm fine." That answer gets people fired. Ethan looked toward the open bay. "I missed 1 clamp." "You don't miss clamps." I was interrupted. "No, you were asleep with your eyes open. I need the hours." Cal folded his arms. "I need the building." It wasn't near an ignition source. "You want to keep explaining how little disaster happened?" Ethan stopped. Cal told him to go home and removed him from the next 2 overnight shifts. "That's 16 hours, Ethan said. "That's the mathematical part. Yes, I need that paycheck. Then come back Monday awake enough to earn it." The missing hours left Ethan $640 short of the insurance down payment. He drove to the campground but did not remember half the road. Caroline's car was parked outside the office. She stood beside the registration desk with Roy's circular saw and a paper grocery bag. She had also brought the red toolbox. Ethan stopped in the doorway. Did Micah's shelves fall? Micah bought a cordless saw. He didn't like Grandpa's? He said it pulls left. It doesn't. I didn't think it did. Caroline glanced at him, her eyes narrowed. "What happened to your shirt?" Ethan looked down. A dark fuel stain covered one side. "Gas? Why are you covered in gas?" "I'm not covered. I have a region." She put the grocery bag on the desk. "Mom made meatloaf. Does she know you're here?" "She sent the meatloaf." That doesn't answer it. "No." Ethan set his keys down and nearly missed the desk. Caroline caught them before they fell. "When did you sleep?" she asked. "Everyone has one question now." "When?" "I've been busy. You look terrible." "Thank you. I don't mean regular terrible." He opened the paper bag. Inside were meatloaf sandwiches wrapped in foil, 2 oranges, and a container of potato salad. His mother had included a fork, but no napkins. Caroline followed him to the cot. "I heard the insurance is expensive," she said. "Dad," Dad tells Mom. Mom tries not to tell me, and accidentally tells me in the first sentence. Ethan sat. "I'll cover it." "How?" "Work." "You can barely sit upright." "I'm sitting very successfully." "You hate borrowing money that much?" "From who?" She did not answer. Their parents had already helped with her roof. Caroline knew it. Ethan could see her calculating the shape of an offer and the resentment that might follow it. "I'm not asking you," he said. "I wasn't offering." "Good." That sounded awful. It sounded honest. She walked to the office door, then stopped. "Where do the sheets go?" "What?" "The clean sheets. There are piles in the store." Mara labeled them. Caroline found the labels and spent an hour sorting linens. She folded fitted sheets with angry precision, flattening the elastic corners as if they had personally disappointed her. Ethan ate half a sandwich, lay back on the cot, and woke to the sound of a cabinet closing. The office had gone dark. A folded blanket covered him. Caroline was gone. On the desk, she had left the circular saw, the red toolbox, and a note. Micah bought his own tools. "These are Grandpa's." I don't know where they belong. Mara found the note in the morning. She set the red toolbox beneath the workbench and kept the circular saw in its case. You slept in your clothes again, she said. I slept. For how long? 7 hours. She checked the clock, then looked surprised. Caroline was here. I gathered from the aggressive linen organization. She returned the toolbox. Mara read the note again. That was decent. Don't sound so shocked. You told me she evicted you into rain. It was barely rain. You called it rain. I can contain multitudes. Mara gave him coffee. Ethan showed her the revised budget and the missing $640. We delay the new mattresses, she said. They're already delivered. Then delay the firewood order. The supplier wants payment on delivery. She moved through the list. Every remaining expense connected to safety or a confirmed reservation. They had already cut comfort almost to the bone. You could use $600 of the business account, Ethan said. Mara looked at him. Not the deposits, the uncommitted balance. You need that for taxes. I need insurance to have guests who pay balances that cover taxes. That is true. Her agreement made him more uneasy than refusal would have. If something else fails, we have nothing, she said. We have $482 in the account. I use $640 from checking, then live on the next marina paycheck. That leaves you almost empty. I've been almost empty before. That is not a qualification. No, it's experience. Mara closed the notebook. Then you need to protect the one asset you're treating as free. What? You? Ethan leaned back. That sounded like Harbor Ridge employee training. It sounded like someone who watched Roy turn pain into a work schedule. I'm not doing that. You missed a fuel clamp. He stared at her. How do you know? Caroline called me. Caroline doesn't have your number. She found it on the Campground website. What else did she tell you? That you looked unsafe to leave alone? That she didn't want you to know she was worried? And that I should make sure you ate the potato salad? Ethan got up. My sister doesn't get to supervise me through you. I told her that. What did she say? She said you would say exactly that. He paced to the window and back. Mara stood in his path. I am not supervising you for Caroline. Then why are you here before 7? Because you scared me. The words stopped both of them. Mara's face changed first. She looked toward the reservation desk. Ethan could smell the coffee between them and the faint bleach that still lingered in the old plumbing. Her hand remained on the notebook. His was close enough to touch it. He stepped back. I'm awake now, he said. Good. Neither mentioned the distance that had briefly disappeared. The insurance payment was due by 5 that afternoon. Ethan transferred $640 from checking and the campground's available $482 into one account, combined them with the money he had already saved from the marina, and submitted the down payment. The confirmation screen spun for nearly a minute. Mara stood beside him. If this declines, he said, I'm throwing the computer into the lake. It weighs 30 pounds. You'll hurt your back. The screen changed. Payment accepted. The policy would become active once Ethan submitted photographs of the completed bathhouse floor, closed south loop, extinguishers, railings, and working smoke alarms. He and Mara spent the afternoon taking pictures. At cabin 6, Mara photographed both rails from 3 angles. You're making it look crooked, Ethan said. It is crooked. It's the perspective. It's the left rail. He adjusted one bracket by 1/8 of an inch. She took the picture again. The insurer approved the final items the following morning. Ethan printed the temporary certificate and taped it beside Roy's red list. The office roof no longer leaked. The well passed. The north loop had power. 5 cabins were usable. The bathhouse floor held firm. Mara read the certificate with her arms folded. What? Ethan asked. You have an insured campground. Say it with more joy. You have an insured campground that is still closed, owes money, and opens in 12 days. That's better. She looked at the 40 names on the calendar. Now comes the part where people show up, she said. Buildings are easier. Mara taught Ethan to check in a guest by making him pretend to be difficult. You booked site 10, he said. I booked site 9. Your confirmation says 10. Roy promised 9. Roy is unavailable. That is a terrible thing to say to a returning guest. He's dead. I'm aware. Then he's very unavailable. Mara leaned across the registration desk. I have camped here for 26 years, and June always gave me 9. Site 9 has another reservation. Move them. No. Why not? Because you are fictional. She broke character. You can't tell a real guest that. I can think it. You'll think it with your whole face. They practiced late arrivals, lost keys, overloaded electrical hookups, complaints about distant bathrooms, and the proper answer when someone asked whether the lake had leeches. Yes, Ethan said. You're supposed to say they're a part of a healthy ecosystem. They're blood-sucking worms. Healthy blood-sucking worms. Mara created check-in packets for each reservation. The packets included a map, gate code, emergency numbers, campground rules, and a handwritten note explaining any site change. Ethan thought the handwritten notes were unnecessary until he saw her write, "Roy had you in cabin 7. We moved you to 5 because 5 is safer, and the squirrels have stronger seniority in 7. 7 doesn't have squirrels," he said. Guests prefer squirrels to structural neglect. The remaining balances began processing 10 days before arrival. Some guests mailed checks, others paid online. For the first time, the business account held more than promises and taxes. Mara kept separate columns for every category. Money received is not the same as money available, she said. Lorna has infected you. June infected me. Ethan paid Glenn's remaining balance, ordered propane, and scheduled the dumpster service. He bought cleaning supplies in bulk and stood in the store comparing toilet paper prices until a clerk asked whether he managed an institution. Possibly, he said. He also paid Mara for 16 recorded hours. She found the envelope beneath the reservation chart. This is too much. It's exactly 16 hours. I work more than that. You recorded 16. I told you some time was free. You can't volunteer at your job. I can if I'm the one doing it. Then I'm firing the volunteer. Mara counted the money again. You still need winter cash? I still need an operations consultant who doesn't secretly work for free. She folded the envelope and put it in her bag. Temporary operations consultant. Extremely temporary. You've only been here every day. Harbor Ridge is beginning to suspect I'm having an affair. With me? With a failing campground. That's less flattering. They know my type. Ethan smiled. Mara did not, but color moved into her face as she turned back to the chart. The first opening weekend required only 6 reservations. The Averys in cabin 6, Lorna Bell at site 9, 2 tent sites, 1 travel trailer, and a pair of sisters in cabin 5. It was a manageable number. Mara repeated that often enough to make it sound suspicious. The second weekend held Ted's 4-site group, 3 cabins, and 6 additional campsites. The third was nearly full within their reduced capacity. If we survive the first, Ethan said, we can panic about the second. We plan. We do not panic. You color-coded 40 strangers. I panicked in an organized manner, Ruth called while Ethan was repairing the screen door on cabin 1. We're having dinner Saturday, she said. Caroline and Micah finally have the dining room arranged. Saturday is opening weekend. Yes, but dinner is at 6. I'll have guests. Can't Mara watch The Office for 2 hours? Ethan held the phone away and looked at it. Mom, it's the first night. I understand that. It's also our first family dinner in Roy's house since everything changed. Caroline's house. You know what I mean? He did. His mother wanted a photograph of everyone seated around the table so the arrangement could begin looking normal. I can't come. You could if you wanted to. I could also leave 6 reservations unsupervised at a campground that hasn't been open in 3 years. They're adults, Ethan. So am I. Ruth sighed. This isn't choosing Caroline. Then stop making every choice about Caroline and saying that. We are trying to support both of you. You paid for her roof. Dad pressure washed my patio. You can call it even. That is unfair. It was a very clean patio. Ruth became quiet. Ethan could hear silverware being placed in a drawer. Caroline wanted you there, she said. Did she? She didn't say she didn't. Powerful invitation. Grief has made all of you cruel. All of us? I didn't call to fight. You called to ask me to leave my opening. I called because families show up for important things. Ethan looked at the cabin screen stretched beneath his hands. Exactly, he said. He ended the call, then had to remove the screen and begin again because he had stapled one side, crooked. The forecast changed that evening. What had been a chance of rain became a slow-moving storm expected to bring 4 inches over 2 days. The heaviest band would arrive 3 nights before opening. Mara studied the radar on the office computer. The drainage should handle it, Ethan said. Should is working hard this week. We graded the bathhouse trench. We haven't finished backfilling behind the foundation. I'll do it tomorrow. The ground is already saturated. We cover it. They covered it. Ethan and Mara stretched tarps over the exposed section, weighted the edges with timbers, cleared every culvert, and walked the loop checking branches above power lines. Ethan moved loose lumber into the maintenance shed and strapped the dumpsters shut. Rain began before dawn. By noon, water moved along both sides of the campground road in brown streams. The new bathhouse drain carried steadily, pouring down the slope exactly as planned. Ethan checked it every hour. At 5, the outlet slowed. Leaves had collected against the gravel. He cleared them with a rake and restored the flow, but the ground around the foundation had already softened. Water pressed beneath the tarp and filled the unfinished edge of the trench. Mara pulled on rubber boots. We need a pump, the fish cleaning pump, not designed for muddy water. I have a utility pump at the marina. How long? 40 minutes. You shouldn't drive. I've driven in rain. A branch cracked somewhere beyond the office. The north loop went dark. For several seconds, Ethan and Mara stood listening to rain strike the bathhouse roof. Then Ethan ran. He reached the main panel and stopped before touching it. The lesson had taken longer than Mara wanted, but it had taken. The disconnect had tripped. Half the loop remained dead after Ethan reset it. Sights 9 through 15 showed no green lights. Farther down, a heavy pine limb lay across the service line, bending it toward the road. Mara arrived behind him. "Do not touch that," she said. "I'm not. Say it. I'm not touching it." "Good." Site 9 was Lorna's. 12 through 15 belonged to Ted's group the following week, but 11 held the travel trailer arriving on opening day. The tent sites did not need power. Cabin 6 was fed from the center panel and remained lit. Cabin 5 had power, but sat close to the flooding bathhouse. Ethan called Glenn. The electrician answered over the sound of a television. "Line down?" he asked after Ethan described it. "Bent, not broken. Treated as live. Shut off the loop. Half the sites still work. If a branch has pulled the service, shut off the loop." Glenn, "All of it." Ethan. Ethan looked at the dark pedestals, then at the ones still glowing. He lowered the disconnect. The entire north loop went black. Glenn would come at first light if the road remained passable. Until then, nobody could know how much damage the limb had caused. Back at the bathhouse, water had reached the bottom of the access opening. Mara moved cleaning supplies to higher shelves, while Ethan drove to the marina for the utility pump. Cal met him at the service door and made him take a second pump, 2 long discharge hoses, and a rain jacket. "Bring them back without sewage," Cal said. "It's rainwater. Everybody says that before sewage." The pumps ran through the night. Ethan directed water downhill, while Mara cleared the outlet each time leaves gathered. The new floor stayed firm, but the crawl space filled faster than they could dry it. At 2 in the morning, Mara stood beneath the bathhouse awning, with rain dripping from her hair. "Cancel the first weekend," she said. Ethan watched the hose pulse. "We don't know the electrical damage yet. We know the ground is flooded, the cabins are dry, the bathhouse might not be usable. We have 2 working toilets in cabins. For 6 reservations, the recreation hall has a restroom, 1 toilet, the store has another. That is not a campground system. That is a scavenger hunt." He turned toward her. "If Glenn fixes the power, and if he can't, then we reduce capacity." "To what?" "Cabin 6, Cabin 1, 2 tent sites near the center. We move Lorna to a powered center site if the office service stays on. We put the trailer in Site 2 on the center panel. Site 2 isn't graded for it. It'll fit. Fit is not safe." "I know." Mara stared at him through the rain. "Do you?" He shut off the pump to move the intake. In the sudden quiet, water dripped from the awning. "I'm not hiding anything from them," he said. "We call everyone affected. We tell them exactly what works. We offer refunds. We let them decide. That cannot be your answer to safety. No. We decide what is safe. They decide if the reduced version is worth coming to. And if nobody comes, then nobody comes." Mara's shoulders lowered slightly. Ethan had expected the words to hurt more. Instead, they made the next step clear. They returned to the office and spread the map beneath a lantern. Rain blurred the windows. The computer remained on because the office service came from a separate panel. Mara crossed out every site connected to the north loop. She marked the center hookups, cabin utilities, alternate bathrooms, high ground, and road drainage. They reduced the first weekend from 6 reservations to 4, unless Glenn restored power and the bathhouse crawl space drained. At 3 in the morning, Ethan called Lorna. She answered awake. "I assumed you would call," she said. "Were you watching the weather? I was an accountant. We watch bad news develop before other people acknowledge it." He told her Site 9 had lost power and offered a center site closer to the office. "Is it level?" "Mostly." "That means no. It means I'll level it tomorrow." "Is the water safe?" "Yes." "Bathrooms?" "Limited but working." "Then move me." "You can cancel." "I know." Darlene listened to the situation and said Cabin 6 still had a toilet, which was more than she and Walt possessed during their first 4 years of tent camping. The travel trailer couple accepted a later arrival time, while Ethan prepared Site 2. The sisters in Cabin 5 agreed to move to 1, farther from the bathhouse. Nobody withdrew. Mara made the final call, then put down the phone. Rain continued against the repaired roof. The emotional support bucket remained empty. "They're still coming," Ethan said. Mara looked at the reduced map. Then morning, "Better bring Glenn," she said. Glenn arrived at 6:12 with coffee in one hand and a chainsaw in the back of his van. "You said first light," Ethan told him. "This is first light for electricians. It's been light an hour. The sun is not licensed." The rain had weakened to a steady drizzle. Water still moved through the drainage pipe below the bathhouse, but the crawlspace had stopped filling. Mara stood at the access opening with a flashlight. "Floor's dry," she said. "Joists are wet around the sill, not the repaired section. Can we open it? If we keep the access open and run fans, guests don't want to see under the bathroom, then place something in front of it. The emotional support bucket, it finally has a purpose." Glenn inspected the fallen branch before allowing Ethan near it. The service line had pulled loose from one support and let rain into a junction box. No wire had broken, but the lower half of the circuit could not be energized until the connection dried and the damaged hardware was replaced. He isolated sites 12 through 21 and restored 1 through 11. Green lights returned around the first curve of the loop. Lorna could have Site 9. The travel trailer could take 11 instead of the muddy center hookup. Ted's foresight group would still have to move the following week, but that had been solved on paper. "Can you finish the rest before next Friday?" Ethan asked. "If the replacement support comes in, and if it doesn't, then no." Glenn looked at the sky. "You keep wanting electricity to respond emotionally. I want a schedule. Electricity has one. You just don't know it." By noon, the entrance road had drained. Ethan spread gravel at the 2 worst sections and used the tractor blade to level Site 11. Mara walked every open path with a rake, clearing sticks and exposing puddles. They propped fans beneath the bathhouse floor and set the emotional support bucket in front of the access panel with a handwritten out-of-service sign. The bucket had never looked more official. At 2:40, Mara stood behind the registration counter with a stack of check-in packets. "You should change your shirt," she said. "It's clean. It says Pritchard Electric. Glenn gave it to me." "Why? Mine tore. It looks like you work for him. I owe him enough." At 2:53, a silver travel trailer appeared at the gate. Ethan and Mara watched it roll down the entrance road. "First guest," he said. "Do not say that to them." "Why?" "It makes people nervous." The trailer stopped outside the office. A woman in her late 60s stepped out of the tow vehicle wearing waterproof boots and a navy vest. She looked at the office, the campground, and the puddle beside her left foot. "Your drainage misses this spot," she said. "Lorna Bell? Obviously." Ethan offered his hand. She shook it once. "I thought you had a smaller camper. My old one leaked. This one leaks less." Mara came out from behind the counter. Lorna hugged her without warning, then immediately released her. "You look tired," Lorna told her. "You look judgmental. I've maintained my standards." Ethan handed over the packet for Site 9. "You restored power," Lorna said. "Sites 1 through 11. Good. You can still take the center site if you prefer. I prefer the one I reserved." She drove the trailer around the loop and backed into Site 9 without assistance. Ethan watched her level it on the first attempt. "She told me mostly level was unacceptable," he said. "It is when you're bad at backing up." Darlene and Walt arrived next. Darlene inspected the finished ramp rails, shook each one hard, and announced they would do. Walt climbed onto the porch and stood looking at the lake. "You kept the view," he said. "That was the cheapest repair." The 2 sisters assigned to Cabin 1 arrived pulling a fishing trailer. Gale spoke rapidly enough for both of them. Joan communicated mostly through facial expressions and carried 3 tackle boxes in one trip. "We booked 5, Gail said. 5 is dry, but 1 is farther from the bathhouse runoff. We don't care about runoff. Joan hates the number 1. Joan's expression suggested this was false. 5 has the new toilet, Ethan said. "We'll take 5, Gail replied. Joan shrugged and carried the tackle boxes in that direction. Mara leaned close. "You rewarded the complaint. I gave them an available cabin. They'll do it again." Joan hates odd numbers. 5 is odd. Ethan looked after them. "I may have been manipulated. Buildings are easier." The 2 tent reservations arrived within minutes of each other, and both believed they had selected the high ground beside the birch grove. One confirmation showed Site 3. The other showed Site 4. The wooden number post for 4 had fallen during the storm and was lying inside 3's boundary. A man named Lewis had already begun setting up his tent in 4 when a woman named Petra told him he was in 3. "My confirmation says next to the birches," Lewis said. "So does mine. Those are the birches. There are birches throughout Michigan." Ethan moved the fallen number post. This did not help. Mara brought the reservation map, but Roy's handwritten note beside Petra's name said, "Quiet Edge Site. Site 4 bordered the road. Site 3 sat farther inside." Roy described 3 to her and assigned 4, Ethan said. Of course he did. Lewis wanted 3 because his rainfly was already spread there. Petra wanted 3 because it was what Roy had promised. Ethan offered Petra Site 6, which was larger, farther from the road, and had 3 birches instead of 2. Petra inspected it. "Can I move the fire ring?" "No." "Can you move the fire ring?" "No." She accepted Site 6. Lewis apologized by carrying 2 of her gear bins. Petra accepted the apology by telling him he was holding them wrong. At 5, all 6 reservations had arrived. No one had requested a refund. No one had driven into the flooded South Loop. No cabin alarm had sounded. The registration board held names beneath the date for the first time in 3 years. Ethan stood inside the office and looked at it. Mara came beside him. "Do not celebrate yet. I'm looking." "You're celebrating with your whole face." A shout came from the bathhouse. The hot water had stopped. Ethan found Walt at the sink with soap on both hands and a polite expression. "Cold is fine," Walt said. "It isn't. It was in the Army." "This isn't the Army. That explains the flower boxes." The water heater's pilot had gone out. Ethan relit it. The flame held for 30 seconds, then died. "Thermocouple," Mara said from the doorway. "Probably. Do we have one?" "We have the old heater in the maintenance shed." "Does it contain the correct part?" Grandpa never threw away an appliance with recognizable metal. Ethan went to the shed. He had planned a welcome dinner in the recreation hall. Chicken roasted in 2 countertop ovens while baked beans warmed on the old store stove. Mara had insisted dinner was unnecessary. Ethan said Roy and June always fed the first guests of a season. They also opened in May, she had said. Then everyone was hungrier. The thermocouple in the old heater had rusted in place. Ethan fought with it for 20 minutes, finally freeing it with penetrating oil and language Walt pretended not to hear. Halfway through installation, the recreation hall smoke alarm began shrieking. Ethan ran outside. Mara met him carrying a roasting pan with black smoke rising from it. "The chicken," she said. "I set the timer. You set the timer on the microwave." The ovens kept cooking. The skin had turned nearly black. One wing had fused to the pan. Darlene appeared with a fork. She removed a piece, blew on it, and tasted. "It's not ruined." "It's charcoal," Mara said. "Charcoal costs extra in some restaurants." Lorna brought salad from her trailer. Gail and Joan contributed potato rolls. Lewis had a pot of chili. Petra produced 3 bottles of wine and asked whether drinking was permitted in the recreation hall. "It is now," Ethan said. They cut away the burned skin, sliced the surviving chicken, and served it beside beans that tasted faintly of smoke. Nobody complained. Ethan was replacing the water heater thermocouple when his phone rang for the 3rd time. His mother. He ignored it. At 6:30, headlights entered the campground. Caroline parked beside the office. A long wooden board extended from her open trunk, wrapped in a moving blanket. She got out, carrying Roy's leather tool apron and a box filled with hand tools. Ethan stood from the water heater. "What are you doing here? Mom says I'm ruining dinner. Are you?" Micah's parents are still eating. She looked toward the recreation hall, where voices carried through open windows. Walt laughed at something Lorna said. Darlene was telling Louis why his method of slicing rolls was inefficient. Caroline's expression changed. "You have people," she said. "That's generally how reservations work. I didn't think, I know." She looked at his wet jeans, the wrench in his hand, and the black streak across his shirt. What burned? Dinner, of course. Caroline opened the trunk and pulled back the moving blanket. The original Mercer's Landing sign lay beneath it. The carved letters were faded, but everyone remained attached, including the I and the apostrophe Roy had supposedly hated. "I found it behind lumber in the garage," she said. Micah was building shelves. Ethan touched one corner. June had painted the pine trees along the bottom. Roy had carved the letters too deep because he did not trust paint to communicate permanence. "I thought it was gone," he said. "So did I." "Why bring it tonight?" Caroline leaned against the car. "Because Mom said you weren't coming to dinner, and I said you were opening the campground. She said that was your choice." "It was." She said everything like it proved something. "What?" "That I chose correctly, and you didn't." Ethan looked at her. Caroline turned one of Roy's hammers inside the box. "I let them make the house sound like a reward. I wanted it to be one. You wanted the house. Yes, you got it. I also wanted them to say I deserved it more." Rainwater fell from the pines in slow drops. Behind them, the recreation hall door opened and closed. Caroline continued before he could answer. "You had all these years with Grandpa where he needed you. I did the appointments and forms, but he talked about you. Ethan fixed this. Ethan figured that out. Ethan knows where everything is. I didn't know about the reservations. I know. You changed the locks. I know." Her voice failed on the second word. She recovered without wiping her eyes. "I thought if I gave you time, you'd stay indefinitely," she said. "And if you stayed, it wouldn't feel like my house. So I packed your things before you could make me ask twice. You made me homeless, I know. Stop saying that like knowing it now changes it then. It doesn't." Ethan looked toward the sign. "I slept on a cot in an office with mice because you needed boundaries. I was cruel." The directness left him without the argument he had prepared. Caroline picked up the toolbox. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight." "Good. I'm asking where these go." He pointed to the maintenance shed. She carried the box there without waiting for him. When she returned, the recreation hall smoke alarm began again. Mara had tried reheating the beans. Caroline went inside, opened windows, and found 2 dish towels. She scrubbed the burned roasting pan, while Darlene explained that the chicken had been completely edible. Ethan finished the water heater repair. The flames stayed lit. By 9, hot water ran in the bathhouse. The smoke had cleared, and Caroline had washed every pan. She left before Ruth's 4th call, taking none of the tools with her. The old sign remained across 2 sawhorses beside the office. Ethan walked the loop after quiet hours. Lights glowed from cabin 6, cabin 5, and Lorna's trailer. Lanterns moved behind tent walls. Low voices traveled through the pines, softened by the lake. Mercer's Landing was not full. Half the electrical loop was dead. The bathhouse smelled faintly burned. Though nothing there had caught fire, the campground owed more money than it had earned, but it was open. Mara joined Ethan near Site 9. She did not say anything for a while. "Buildings are easier?" he asked. "Much." He looked toward the office sign, waiting to be raised again. Mara slipped her hand into his. Only for a moment. It was enough. The Averys were awake before Ethan. He found Darlene on the cabin 6 porch with coffee balanced on the railing. Walt sat beside her, one crutch against his chair, watching mist lift from the lake. "Hot water?" Ethan asked. Darlene raised her mug. "Present. Toilet?" Walt pointed through the open cabin door. "Also present. Ramp?" "You watched us use it," Darlene said. "Go bother somebody else." Ethan checked the bathhouse anyway. The fans had dried the crawl space. The floor held firm. The patch tile remained barely offensive. Someone had moved the emotional support bucket aside and placed a roll of paper towels on it. At Site 9, Lorna had already opened her awning and arranged a chair, a small table, and one potted fern. "You travel with a plant?" Ethan asked. "It dislikes my neighbor." She gave him a mug of coffee without asking whether he wanted one. "How much did yesterday cost?" she asked. "Financially, is there another system?" "Sleep, dignity, chicken. Those belong in separate columns." She took the notebook he had carried under his arm. Ethan almost objected, then remembered he had sent her the budget voluntarily. Lorna read the weekend totals. She asked why propane was higher than projected, why the dumpster company had charged a delivery fee, and whether Mara's payroll taxes had been accounted for. Mara is a consultant. Does Mara control her hours? She ignores them. Not the question. She has another job. We wrote a contract, then classify the expense correctly. Ethan drank the coffee. It was better than his. Lorna turned to the seasonal forecast. If the remaining reservations hold, you'll cover direct costs. That's what I calculated. You calculated a profit of $3,800. Yes, you have not paid yourself. I don't need to pay myself yet. Then it is not profit. It is unpaid labor pretending to be success. He looked across the loop. Louis was trying to fold his rainfly, while Petra gave instructions from 3 sites away. I'm not expecting much this season. Expect something. Otherwise, you'll build a business that survives by consuming you. Mara had used nearly the same words. Did she tell you to say that? June did. Years ago. Lorna closed the notebook. Roy believed every dollar belonged to the campground. June believed the campground belonged to the people running it too. She was better at this. She was better at many things. Roy was better at making strangers feel like they had been expected all year. Lorna looked toward the registration office. He called me in February, she said. Asked whether people would return for one short season. What did you tell him? That some would. He already had the 40? No. He had a list of people he hoped would answer. Ethan had imagined Roy announcing the reopening with his usual confidence, promising hot water and bright lights he had not tested. Instead, he pictured him alone at the office computer, opening old reservation files and asking one person at a time. Did he tell you I was helping? Ethan asked. He said you'd fix the dock and pump. He also said you would tell him the schedule was impossible. He never showed me the schedule. That part sounds like Roy. Why did you reserve if you thought he wasn't ready? I reserved after Mara told me she'd spoken to him. I assumed she would prevent the most dangerous mistakes. Mara left. I know. That was when I began reconsidering. Ethan smiled despite himself. Lorna returned his notebook. Roy wasn't certain, Ethan. He was asking. The distinction stayed with him. By checkout Sunday, Petra had complimented Site 6 twice without admitting it was better than 4. Gail and Joan brought Ethan 6 cleaned fish, wrapped in freezer paper because Cabin 5's toilet had not moved. The travel trailer couple left Site 11 without a rut. Lorna signed the guest book. The Fern approves. So do I. Add winterization to the budget. Darlene wrote beneath her, ramp good. Chicken questionable. When the final vehicle passed through the gate, Ethan stood beside the office, feeling as if someone had turned off a machine inside his chest. Mara flipped the sign from open to closed. We survived, he said. 6 reservations. That is how surviving begins. It is also how overconfidence begins. He sat on the porch step. Mara sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Neither moved. You did well, she said. The simple praise unsettled him more than criticism. So did you. I know. That ruined it. You looked uncomfortable. They sat until the quiet stopped sounding like danger. Caroline returned Tuesday evening with sandpaper, paint, and no explanation. She laid the old campground sign across the picnic table. The letters need work, she said. They're carved. The paint needs work. You bought the wrong green. It's the color from the original can. The original can still existed? In the garage cabinet behind 14 jars of screws. That paint is 40 years old. I had the store match it. They sanded flaking varnish without removing June's painted pine trees. Caroline used a fine brush around the apostrophe. I thought Grandpa hated punctuation, Ethan said. He hated being corrected. Different thing. Mara arrived from Harbor Ridge and found them arguing about whether the top edge needed another coat. It does, she said. Caroline handed her the brush. For 2 hours, the 3 of them worked without discussing the inheritance. Caroline asked practical questions about reservations. Mara answered them, without softening the difficulty. Ethan replaced the backing strips while they painted. When Caroline left, she took Roy's tool apron, but not the tools. I'm washing it, she said before Ethan could ask. It smells like mice. The replacement support for the electrical line arrived Thursday. Glenn restored the remaining North Loop sites with 4 hours to spare before Ted Kessler's group appeared. Their convoy contained 4 RVs, 2 pickup trucks, 7 men, one woman named Bev, who said she had attended only because someone needed common sense, and enough folding chairs to seat a county meeting. Jerry inspected the drainage trench before parking. "You ran the pipe too shallow near the outlet," he told Ethan. "It drains. Until frost. I'll fix it before winter." Jerry nodded. "Good." Ted tried to return the $80 rental fee by hiding cash inside the registration packet. Mara found it and put it on his store account. "We don't have a store," Ted said. "You do now. What can I buy?" "Firewood." "For $80? You contain multitudes." The group filled sites 12 through 15 with noise, grilled meat, and arguments about vehicle manufacturing. They did not ask for free camping. When a pedestal breaker tripped because Jerry connected an electric griddle, coffee maker, heater, and television to the same circuit, Jerry blamed the griddle. Ethan reset the breaker only after making him unplug 3 appliances. "This is an insult to American infrastructure," Jerry said. "This is 30 amp service." Same thing. The weekend was busier than the first. A cabin key disappeared and was found in Darlene's borrowed paint can. One toilet clogged. The store refrigerator finally died, with 12 bags of ice inside. Ethan moved them to guest coolers and wrote refrigerator after pump reserve in the notebook. Mara spent 15 hours at Mercer's Landing and recorded 8. Ethan noticed. "This says 8, he told her, Sunday night. "That is our maximum. That is our maximum paid. It isn't permission to donate 7. I chose to be here. You have a job." "I know," Harbor Ridge reminded me. "What happened?" my director asked, whether I intended to continue leaving early Fridays. "What did you say?" "That I intended to use my scheduled time off. And," she said, "autumn weddings require flexibility. So does this place." Mara leaned against the counter. "I know." Ethan looked at the timesheet. "I can't ask you to risk your job. You didn't. You're here because of me. I came because of the campground. That's better? It's more accurate." He set down the sheet. "Why?" Mara looked through the office window. The Kessler Group's fires had gone low. Someone laughed on the North Loop. "Harbor Ridge is beautiful," she said. "Everything works. When something breaks, I submit a purchase order. Guests leave reviews about pillow firmness and whether the wine glasses are too thick. That sounds terrible. It's safe. It pays me. It also doesn't need me in any way that feels personal. This place needs everybody personally. That's its main defect. I know." He waited. Mara took the pen and changed the 8 to 15. "Pay me when the final reservation's clear. Thank you. I resent your integrity. It's expensive." Their hands met above the paper. This time, neither withdrew immediately. The old sign went up, Monday. Glenn brought his ladder. Jerry, still at the campground for a late checkout, insisted the brackets were inadequate and produced better ones from his truck. Caroline arrived during her lunch break, carrying Roy's cleaned tool apron. Daniel and Ruth followed her. Ethan had not invited them. His mother stepped from the SUV and stopped when she saw the restored letters rise above the office porch. For a moment, she looked younger. Not different enough for Daniel to have been speaking literally, but close. "June painted those trees," Ruth said. "I know," Ethan replied. Daniel helped Glenn lift the sign. Caroline held the ladder. Mara directed everyone from below and refused to let Jerry add a third bracket merely because he owned one. When the final bolt tightened, Mercer's Landing stood complete again. Ruth wiped her eyes. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she said. "Look what you've done with what he left you." Ethan climbed down the ladder. The sentence was meant as praise. It carried every old decision inside it. "What he left all of us," Ethan said. "Then you gave me." Ruth's smile faded. "That isn't how I meant it. I know. We thought the campground suited you. You thought Caroline deserved the house, and I could absorb the risk. That's not fair." Caroline spoke before Ethan could. "It is fair." Ruth looked at her. "Caroline, we wanted him to take it, because then nobody had to feel bad about me taking the house." Daniel kept one hand on the ladder. "We used the assessments," he said quietly. "You used the number that made it feel equal," Ethan replied. "Nobody came out here." His father nodded once. "No, we didn't." Ruth looked toward the occupied sites, the clean patio, the cabins with repaired rails. "But you made it work," she said. That doesn't make what you did right. The campground went on around them. A screen door closed. Jerry shouted that someone had taken his adapter. From cabin 6, Darlene shouted back that nobody wanted his adapter. Ethan lowered his voice. I'm not going to let you turn this into proof that you believed in me. Ruth's eyes filled. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder, but he did not defend her. Caroline stood beside Ethan without touching him. No, Ruth said finally. I suppose you shouldn't. It was not an apology. It was the first open space where one might someday fit. Ruth and Daniel left after an hour. Caroline stayed. She put on Roy's tool apron and helped Mara clean fire rings until dark. Reservations continued arriving. The system held, not perfectly, never quietly, but it held. The 40th reservation belonged to Vernon Shaw, the man who had accepted relocation from the Squirrel condominium without complaint. He arrived on the final Friday of October with his brother, Paul, and enough firewood to survive until spring. Both men wore matching brown coats and claimed the similarity was accidental. Ethan gave them the key to cabin 4. 8 still unavailable? Vernon asked. The Squirrels extended. Smart. Interest rates are terrible. Cabin 4 had become the most requested cabin after Darlene posted a photograph of its quilt in the returning guests' email group. June's folded work remained at the foot of the bed beneath a freshly washed cover. Ethan had replaced the heater, sealed the windows, and added weather stripping around the door. Vernon entered, looked around, and nodded once. Smells the same. Is that good? Depends what it is. The last weekend brought 6 reservations. The ground had hardened with frost, and breath showed in the mornings. Campfires burned earlier. Nobody tried swimming, though Ted sent a message saying Jerry would have. The campground had developed a rhythm Ethan could not have imagined from the cot. He knew which toilets required the handle to be held for an extra second. He knew the difference between an electrical breaker tripping and a guest switching it off while searching for the water hookup. He could hear a vehicle slow at the entrance and tell whether the driver was arriving, lost, or considering asking to use the bathroom without paying. Mara said this was not a marketable skill. You sell the guest experience, Ethan told her. We do not market identifying free bathroom seekers by engine noise. Then we're leaving money on the table. She had remained at Harbor Ridge through the season and worked every weekend at Mercer's Landing. All her hours went on the timesheet now. Ethan paid them every Monday, even when she suggested delaying a check for propane. They had not discussed the moment beside Site 9 when she held his hand. They had also not stopped finding reasons to stand close. On the final Saturday, frost killed the store refrigerator completely. It gave one low hum, clicked, and filled the room with the smell of hot wiring. Ethan unplugged it. Do you think Grandpa knew it was dying? He asked. Mara opened the freezer compartment. A single ice tray sat inside. Roy believed appliances could sense disloyalty. He used to kick it. That was encouragement. They moved refrigerator to the spring list. The list had become more important than Roy's old red one. Ethan kept it in a binder with sections for electrical work, cabins, water, insurance, and costs. Every repair had a date. Every expense had a receipt. Deposits remained separate until each guest checked in. Lorna would have approved. She did approve. Her envelope arrived with the afternoon mail, containing a note and a printed copy of Ethan's updated winter budget. Your arithmetic has improved. Your definition of profit remains emotionally compromised. Below that, she had circled the line where he had assigned himself a wage. Better. Ethan taped the note inside the binder. That evening, the final guests gathered in the recreation hall. There was no official dinner. Ethan had learned from the chicken. Everyone brought something, which created 9 desserts, 2 pots of stew, and no bread. Vernon produced crackers from his truck. Preparedness, he said. That's 30 sleeves of crackers, Mara replied. I don't know these people. Paul took off his matching coat and revealed a matching sweater underneath. Darlene and Walt were not there, but Darlene had mailed a framed copy of the ramp photograph with a note instructing Ethan to hang it only after taking down the faded poster advertising 2009 fishing license prices. He obeyed. The guests talked until quiet hours, then continued talking more softly. Nobody asked Ethan to entertain them. Nobody asked what the land was worth. They asked whether Mercer's Landing would open again next year. Not booking yet, he said. Several people protested. We need to finish the season, close the books, inspect everything, and decide capacity. Mara watched him from beside the coffee urn. Roy would have opened the calendar before winterizing the pipes. Ethan knew that now, without hating him for it. "We'll send an announcement when we're ready," he said. Vernon raised a paper cup. Responsible? Disappointing, but responsible. The last vehicle left Sunday at 2:17. Paul returned the cabin 4 key. Vernon returned because he had forgotten his crackers. They drove through the gate with one window open and matching sleeves waving goodbye. Ethan went into the office. On Roy's calendar, he placed a black check beside the final blue reservation. 40 confirmed, 40 honored. Some guests had changed sites. Some had arrived late, left early, or camped without the services Roy promised. None had been deceived. Every person who stayed had known what worked and what did not before coming through the gate. Ethan stared at the completed calendar until the numbers blurred. Mara came in carrying the open sign. "You okay?" 40. I can count. All of them. Yes. He set the pen down. "I thought the reservations were something Grandpa did to me. They were partly something Grandpa did to everyone." He asked them. "So," Lorna said, "he didn't know whether they'd come. Neither did we." Mara flipped the sign to closed and hung it behind the desk. Outside, the empty loop did not feel abandoned. Fire rings held gray ash. Tire tracks crossed the gravel. Cabin curtains had been opened for cleaning. The silence belonged to a place resting after use. They closed the books at the picnic table, where Mara had first shown Ethan the real cost of opening. The season had brought in enough to pay the electrical work, well service, insurance, supplies, propane, waste removal, Mara's wages, and the delinquent property taxes. After winter expenses and a reserve for the fish cleaning pump, Mercer's Landing had earned $1,863. Mara turned the notebook toward Ethan. "You pay yourself $1,200. That leaves $663. "Yes. For the business." "Yes. That isn't much. It is also not nothing." He had worked hundreds of hours. $1,200 did not make those hours reasonable. It did not transform the campground into a fortune or make his family's division fair. He wrote the check anyway. "Pay to the order of Ethan Mercer." His hand hesitated above the memo line. "Owner's draw," Mara suggested. He wrote first season. Mara did not correct him. They used the remaining operating money to winterize cabin 4 properly. Ethan insulated the water lines, installed a shutoff he could reach without crawling beneath the porch, and sealed the heater vent. Cabin 6 would come next spring, before Darlene's return. The south loop remained closed. Ethan wrote spring beside it on Roy's whiteboard, instead of drawing a line through it. Possible was not the same as finished. Daniel came to help drain the cabin plumbing. He arrived with his own tools, 2 thermoses of coffee, and no pressure washer. They worked beneath cabin 4 in the cold, passing wrenches back and forth. After an hour, Daniel said, "Your mother wants to come by. She knows the road. She doesn't know if she's welcome." Ethan tightened the fitting. "She is." Daniel nodded. "She's sorry," he said. "She can tell me." "I know." They continued in silence. When the line had drained, Daniel sat on an overturned bucket and rubbed his hands together. "I kept saying the campground land held value because it made the division sound sensible," he said. "I didn't want to examine anything that would make Caroline's house harder. I know, I also thought you'd sell. You told me to. I thought selling would protect you from failing." Ethan looked across the empty North Loop. "And if I sold because you expected me to? I would have called it practical. Would you have thought I failed?" Daniel considered the question longer than Ethan expected. "Probably," he said. "That's the part I'm ashamed of. It was not elegant. Ethan trusted it more because it was not." Daniel helped him close the access panel. Before leaving, he placed 1 thermos on the office desk. "Yours is terrible," he said. "That's Mara's line. She's right." Ruth came 2 days later, carrying no food. She walked through the office, looked at the repaired ceiling, and sat on the edge of the cot. "I thought giving Caroline the house meant giving her security," she said. "I thought giving you the campground meant giving you freedom. You thought I wouldn't mind the difference. I thought you were used to uncertainty." Ethan leaned against the desk. "That doesn't mean it costs me less?" "No." His mother looked at Roy's calendar. "I'm sorry we made your ability to survive the reason you were expected to survive more." It was the closest she had ever come to describing what they did, without asking him to soften it for her. "I'm not ready to act like it didn't happen," Ethan said. "I'm not asking you to." She stayed for coffee. She drank half a cup and asked whether the machine had been cleaned this century. Caroline returned Roy's chair on a Wednesday. Micah helped carry it from the back of his truck. He was taller than Ethan remembered and looked uncomfortable in a useful way. Caroline said, "It belongs here," he said. Caroline stood behind him with one hand on the chair back. "I said I couldn't keep it in the living room." "That's different," Ethan replied. "Yes." They placed it beside the reservation desk. The blue cushion still held Roy's shallow dent. The chair smelled less like him after months in Caroline's basement, but not entirely less. Caroline ran one hand over the arm. "The roof is finished," she said. "Good. The kitchen plumbing isn't. Not good." "Micah wants to do it himself," Micah said. "I have watched 4 videos. Ethan looked at Caroline. "Take his tools. I have." Micah accepted this without protest and went outside to bring in the last box from the truck. Caroline had packed Roy's photographs, Campground guest books, and June's old tablecloths. "These were in the house," she said. "You can keep some." "I did." Ethan looked at her. "I kept the picture from the dock," she admitted. "The one from last summer. You said it was mine. I copied it. That is a level of crime I can tolerate." She smiled, then became serious. "I'm still sorry, I know. Does it help?" "Sometimes." Caroline nodded. She did not ask for more. She had begun coming to the campground on Tuesday evenings, when her office closed early. Sometimes she folded sheets. Sometimes she brought dinner. Once she and Ethan argued for 40 minutes about the store inventory and did not mention the house at all. Forgiveness did not arrive as a decision. It appeared in work neither of them was required to do. Ethan replaced the cot before the first snow. He built a wall across the back of the office, added a used kitchenette, and bought a real bed from a motel renovating its rooms. The apartment remained small. When he opened the oven, it blocked the only cabinet. The shower took 7 minutes to become warm. It had a lock he controlled. Mara inspected it on the night he moved in. "The oven is poorly planned," she said. "The cabinet is unnecessary. You own 2 plates." "Exactly." She walked into the office and sat in Roy's chair. It creaked beneath her. "What happens to the temporary operations consultant?" Ethan asked. "She returns next season under a written contract with a higher rate. Demanding? She also refuses to work more than recorded hours." "I've heard that before." Mara stood. "Ann Harbor Ridge? I'm staying through winter. I like regular paychecks. Responsible. Disappointing, but responsible." He smiled. She stepped close enough that he did not have to wonder whether distance had disappeared by accident. When she kissed him, the office phone rang. They both ignored it. After the 4th ring, the answering machine clicked on. A man's voice asked when next year's reservations would open. Mara rested her forehead against Ethan's. "Do not answer that," she said. "I wasn't going to." Outside, the restored sign moved slightly in the winter wind. Beyond it, the campground waited, closed, imperfect, and no longer unwanted.